there will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Listening to different podcasts, like in a whole different reality, which they think completely different things about Bitcoin.
They have got my money in their banking system. I should be able to access it, right?
Apple is live.
There's a good number of fucking, pretty smart Bcashers.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency, this is episode number 142, Crypto Copium and TapSwap Pump, featuring Emergent Reasons and Fiendish Crypto. Today is Sunday, the 16th of February, 2025. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jet is doing the producing. Quick price check, although we will discuss this in more detail in a moment. BCH USD $331.36 for 100 megasats, which is down. One BTC sat buys 293 BCH sats, which is way down. One ETH buys 815 megasats, which is only a little bit down. Selene 30-day users 795, and Tokenaut TVL is it didn't even load. It seems like maybe that's bugged, but it looks to be about 25,500 TVL. Let's say, right, our guests today, you know them and love them, two of the strongest BCH contributors we have overall. First up is General Protocol's co-founder, Emergent Reasons. You've been on the show a few times before, but have we ever done an episode with just you? I feel like maybe you've only been on group episodes, or am I misremembering that?
I don't remember, man. I always have a good time when I come on, so I don't know.
Anyway, how you doing? What's
it probably means I was on with other people.
Yeah. What's new with you in BCH land? What's the latest and greatest?
Yeah, that's a hard. Well, I mean, in BCH land, right? There's a lot going on, and it's. I mean, I've said it many times, but it's getting to the point that way beyond the point that I know, everybody and everything that's going on, which is fantastic. I love it, but it's also a bit. Not in a bad way, but just like surprising or disconcerting. Like it's a different phase, things moving into a different phase, and it's great. But as far as like what we're working on is all the native wallet stuff, which is this big open-ended question that we have to solve. And so that's what most of our time is spent on, and that's 90%, behind the curtain at this point. So yeah, just working hard on the native wallets.
So the BCH bull, I mean, obviously you're still like maintaining BCH bull and still working on it, but that's growing nicely, and you're kind of like, we're putting I knew you were working on this. We've talked about it before, but I didn't know that it was like the majority of reresources is going onto this. So you clearly think this is the absolute
vast majority of resources are going into the wall, into the XO stack and all that. Yeah, right.
So what kind of time frame before we see something?
John's gone white.
This year?
I can't believe you asked me. Jeremy, we had a deal.
This year? No, it's important, right? With anything that's new, you got to validate it. And so we're going to try to validate it in steps and pieces and get people using parts and bits of it, right? Because the real main point of the whole thing is the XO stack. And the wallet is just one of those things where it's like, okay, you can't just make the tools and then expect everything to happen magically. It's one of those expectation things. You have to make the tools and you have to actually use them to make something and show how it works and get people using it. So, but the stack part, we're going to start releasing in pieces. What's that?
Well, you guys don't have to, you don't, like you say that, but you don't have to do that. Obviously you do have to get it implemented somewhere, but you could collaborate with with Selene, with Paytaka, with Zapit, and roll it out that way if you wanted. You don't have to build. I mean, I'm happy if you think the best way to do it is to build your own wallet, but like you say, you could collaborate with those rather than doing it sort of from scratch with regards to the wallet part.
I'm hoping it'll be both, and then at the end we don't have to do it. But just, history and experience tells us that when you have a vision for something and it's different from what exists already, you have to do it yourself. And so I hope that'll be wrong, and it'll be one of those things that, the exception to the rule. But yeah, we're just going ahead with the idea that we've got to do it ourselves. And but like I said, the stack is the main point, and we're going to have that out there in pieces and get it validated and see if people use it. And I'll be beyond happy if people start picking it up and using it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, like you say, that is just generally a BCH lesson. If I was reflecting on what the ecosystem has learned over a few years, I think we're very strongly at the point of sort of vertical integration, right? Everyone in BCH is kind of like, you just got to build as much of everything yourself, or alternatively, in the very strongly aligned BCH ecosystem. Any deviation, any outside contractors, anyone who's slightly off on their own thing, anyone who's conveniently around in the moment, that is a recipe for disaster. And it's going to blow up in our face. And it has so many times that at this point,
or on the other side, just nothing happens, right? Which is worse, which is much worse even, right? Where somebody has a great idea and just doesn't quite go far enough with it, and then nothing happens fundamentally. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm well on board with you in that, and that's always why I'm always preaching about BCH maximalism and stuff. It's really just about the resources that we have in the community. People are sort of talking about, oh well, how do you reach out and how do we onboard more people and stuff? That's good, that's important, right? But the best way to get outreach is to do more sort of focusing inwards, right? Like this show, ironically, one of the biggest promotional platforms for BCH is me talking only to people who care a lot about BCH. And then that crowd of people grows, and then that's how it snowballs, right? So I think we always got to keep that mindset of the answers are within. You got to fix yourself, and then the world, will take care of itself, kind of an idea. All right, Fiendish, you're next up, our host of Fiendish and Friends, absolute banger series. For anybody who hasn't tuned into that, you absolutely have to, because it's amazing and gives a very different spin. It started off as a 1 hour show to quickly just capture some BCH, and then quickly devolved into about like an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I feel somewhat vindicated in my choice of format for this show. Any thoughts on how that's been playing out? All right, we can't hear you. Or I can't hear you anyway. Anyway, in the meantime, you're going to be at BLISS, yeah? Emergent? We got the
absolutely.
On the screen.
Yeah, for sure. I've already got the ticket. Yeah, on the, I think, it's on the slide there, right? The slide is up there, right there.
Nice
that's
choice,
me.
a very anime
style
one.
Yeah, with the little pet. At least that's how I saw it, in the little pet there. I thought my kids would enjoy that one. Has a little bit of a Kirby vibe, if you know old games. On the native wallet topic, we've been doing a lot of work on that in the background. Like I was saying, most of our resources going into that. But on the BCH Bull, the software itself, there's 1,000 things you always could do, but we have to. It's not like we're a huge conglomerate and can do everything at the same time. We've got to pick and choose what we work on, and so we've got this long list of things that we would love to do, but we've got to choose carefully on what is going to, for us, right? Because for us, we're a little bit different than other places where you can think of it as BCH Bull has saturated the BCH market, right? The market of heavy BCH users. To some degree, it's saturated that. And so for BCH Bull to grow it must get outside of the traditional, BCH market. And so the XO is one thing we're working on. And then the other is experimenting with some marketing and see if we can actually, break out of the bubble, which is very hard, right? Because that fundamentally ends up being either crypto users or non-crypto users. And crypto users are famously tribal, except for the hardcore degens, right? Who will go anywhere. Want to attract and be like, hey, you can do all your stuff over here, right? And get people to do that. But that's tough. And then the other is, getting outside of crypto and just normal people, merchants, and so forth with Paytaka. So I'm super happy to see Paytaka with their thing, where they've made this pseudo stable coin where the users can just hit a button and stabilize the BCH that they receive as merchants or whatever. So so we're doing both of those, right? We have to get outside the BCH circle as well.
Yeah, that's been requested like a bunch of times. That's been theorized about, but it hasn't come off.
Nobody ever actually did it. Yeah, they've done it.
Well, that's right. Exactly. You know, it just goes to show, I think a lot of these ideas that circulate in the community, it's kind of like people know what would be a good thing to try, but the problem is we just only have so many resources and they're already maxed out on everything that's going on. And then just as one group or one company or one person or one investor gets a little bit of extra resources, they can then change that into filling one of those gaps. And that's how things slowly build out. You know, like I always think of that with Selene, right? When we started Selene, everybody was still like using bitcoin.com and was like, this is going in the wrong direction with no sign of stopping. We've got no we need an open source on like fully on-chain light wallet that works on mobile, that's cross-platform, all this stuff. And it was like everybody knew that we needed that for about 2.5, 3 years. It was only once I'd got the show to a decent enough running state that then we could switch over and start that project as well. And then in the meantime, the gap's also been filled. Yeah, with Paytaka, Cash and Eyes came up as well, specifically for the cash token stuff, but it's kind of also solved that same problem. So the gaps get filled. It just takes longer than people expect, I think, sometimes.
And it's even more than the gaps getting filled, right? It's entrepreneurs.
Brilliant. All right, John, you want to finish your point?
Yeah. Let me finish the point because it's an important one. It's not just filling in gaps, but it's if you had a centralized company, like for example, General Protocols, and we have limited resources and we choose certain things to work on, and those match our vision, our resources, our strengths, and our weaknesses, whatever. Those make sense for us. But the great thing about the decentralized ecosystem is, Paytaka has very different strengths and weaknesses, and they're doing something completely different that I would never do because they're very good at what they do. And then Zapit is doing something completely different also, right? They've gotten into mobile gaming and making people gamifying things. And then, what you're doing is another thing that's also very useful, extremely useful for onboarding and so forth. So yeah, it's all these people that are doing things that make sense for them and that wouldn't make sense for others. And you wouldn't get if you were approaching this as like a foundation, deciding what to do, you wouldn't get the same results. So I don't know. I love seeing it.
Yeah, that kind of organic decentralization, which is really at a base level is just what an economy is. An economy is people in different situations producing the thing that makes sense for them to produce, right? So
except for us, we have this additional alignment, right? Where we like to see the success of others as opposed to being indifferent or even like heavily competitive. We love to see the success of other people in the space, even if they're pseudo competitive, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's true now because the BCH scene can grow and then that just benefits everyone. But the beautiful thing is the whole point of Bitcoin is that it will even be true once we're the global reserve currency because everyone will be pouring their economic power straight into the 21 million that everyone else is invested in. So that's not going away anytime soon. It just changes from, well, it's already there. It will still forever be the case that we're all working on the 21 million. And then at the start, we also have that additional incentive, which is growing the pie is better than competing for bigger slices of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Fiendish.
Anybody want to take a bet if Fiendish's mic is still working?
So tell us, Fiendish and Friends, how's that been going?
Yeah, what I was saying to you is it's still an hour format, Jamie. So I didn't know what you were saying there about being 2 hours long. It's still an hour. It just takes sometimes, it's an hour, but sometimes it goes a little bit over, just
an hour star.
Even the edited versions are a little long.
Yeah, so at the start, the Fiendish and Friends concept, so just a little background to this. This is the Fiendish and Friends idea was something that I thought of very early in 2024. And it was actually originally wanted to be filmed, set up a small studio in my house for it. And but with all the thoughts that were going on, I was like, oh, Jesus, I'm never actually going to get this launched. So let's just get it out there and get it done. And I thought about the format, and I really wanted to offer something different to what you're offering. So something a bit more bite-sized, something that they were sort of dealing with more the high level, dipping into a little bit, but something that someone could listen to on their way to work or on the commute or something. And but in the end, as we quickly discovered, if we wanted to deliver some news in there too, and also have a couple of speakers, it's just not enough time to delve into the sort of interesting questions that come along to it. So it's expanded a little bit. So now I guess it's probably on average about 1 hour and a half. And yeah, I think it's going well. The thing is, at the moment, still Fiendish and Friends is very much an internal thing. So I agree with you, Jeremy. The community, it's really good having these like activities that are really designed for the community, and I think that's a very valid point. The next stage is also, which I'm very keen on, is to start sort of leaning out of that comfort zone, leaning out and have people from the broader, not necessarily just crypto, but just anyone that's sort of interested in decentralization, freedom tech, and just, it might even be to do with just slightly with politics, or just with people that are a bit skeptical of centralization or authoritarianism, and how can we use technology to prevent that? So I'm very excited in going in that direction. So I hope we see more of that going forwards. But yeah, Fiendish and Friends has been a lot of fun, had a lot of great people on it, including John Neary. And this, the last episode with Matthew Goikens, which we're going live, it's actually already on Apple Podcast today, but I need to do a tweet about that. Really exciting, really great. And, we're getting quite a few listeners. So the average episode of the last few episodes is probably altogether about 400 or 500 listeners, something about that altogether across all the platforms, which I think for BCH is, and especially for a new podcast, is about as good as one could expect.
Yeah. No, it's been going incredibly well. And I have to say thank you both to you and to Emergent for doing the GP spaces, because in doing that, it serves two really important functions for me. First is that it gives me some stuff to listen to that is not just, like my own show, which I do listen to as well. Sometimes you've got to dog food your own products, but to get like fresh ideas, angles, guess the way you guys do different things, you have your own flavor, and so that also helps me to reflect on what's going on in BCH. And then secondly, it also, I feel, takes some of the pressure off me. Back when basically it was just me doing these shows, I was really trying to do like one a week. Sometimes when the show was very early on, we did even more than that. We did 5 a month or something like that, and just to keep making sure there was stuff coming out in the BCH ecosystem and people weren't just dropping off from lack of fresh stuff, because the community was just so small. I kind of had to try and fill as much of that gap as I have. But now that you guys are both regularly producing good stuff as well too, it means that I can afford to slow things down a little bit and put some energy into other parts of the ecosystem that need it as well too. So yeah, I really appreciate both of those elements from you guys. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on what it's been like getting into content creating such as it is. I don't know that it's either of your sort of traditional wheelhouse, but needs must, right?
Yes. What I can definitely say is the 80-20 rule. So this is something I'm still getting the balance of. So there's definitely a lot of effort goes into the small details. I would say a tremendous amount. So, just setting up the podcast itself and making sure that you're aware of the content, the person, the sort of where the conversation might go to, sort of, make sure that it's got some steering or make sure it's interesting and informative to the listener. And that takes time, but it's mostly just you have to be there. But if it was just to be stopping at that would be a very small amount. But then getting that audio, putting an image to it, making sure it's available to listen to afterwards. There's quite a lot of stuff there, which takes quite some time. So I have a lot of respect for that, and I can only imagine how much video just multiplies that. So I do home videos for the family. So I know already, video editing is quite a lot of work anyway. But yeah, so I have a lot of respect for what you're doing. You guys here on the BCH podcast appreciate there's a hell of a lot more work that goes on than, of course, just this conversation we're having here. So yeah, it's been a good endeavor and a lot more respect for content creators.
Yeah, I mean, it just brings to my mind the fact that you never hear now, but maybe 10 years ago you did, as this whole content creating stuff was really ramping up. I mean, YouTube had been around longer than that, and podcasting too, but over the last 10 years, it's become much more of a thing. 10 years ago, the first people who were making big money in it, I remember people would dismiss it like, oh, these guys, they just get on, sit in their chair, they talk for 1 hour and they make millions of dollars. Like, what is this cushy job that they're doing? How ridiculous is that? They don't have a proper job like I do. There was that kind of angle of dismissing it in the culture. And that has gone away, I guess, as a result of, firstly, a lot more competition is now in that space. So it's very obvious that just talking in front of a camera is going to get you nowhere. That's going to get you 0 listeners because you're not saying anything interesting. You don't have a platform. You don't have a reputation. You don't have proof of work. You don't have connections in the industry. You don't have a unique insight. All these different things. And then secondly, because of a lot of different people trying that, everybody has sort of also cottoned on that there's a lot more work than just what the finished product looks like, which is true of everything, I guess.
Imagine a lot of people gave up content creating. It's like, do you know, I'm going to go and get myself a normal job because that's a lot.
Yes. It's very entrepreneurial.
And even the things that look like, oh, it's one person, or even, it's just one person or it's 2 people. In reality, for any of those serious ones, there's a lot of people in the background doing a lot of different work, right? So it's a real production now.
Yeah, of course. Like, just to give some insight, like on the podcast, we have 5 or 6 people. Like, this is a small show, and it's not like 5 or 6 full-time people. Like, none of us are really full-time.
Well, these days, nothing like full-time is like kind of in the past now, right? Like everything's some form of gig at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a large part.
Increasingly so. Yeah. Yeah, Jet, what were you going to say?
I think another part of it is like, you had people like influencers or personalities that wanted to do podcasts but didn't want to do the production. And so you've had these, mostly in LA, production studios pop up, and they charge a ridiculous hourly rate. And so, like, I think anyone that was like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast to make a quick buck is now being hit by like, oh, I have to pay $800 an hour for a podcast. Like, I can't do that.
And that's not promoting it or giving it, filling up the content or anything. That's literally just like the audio work and the distribution, maybe maybe managing the guest slots or whatever.
What I'm thinking of is specifically like having a designated space or a designated room, and then the equipment already set up and like 1 to 2 people there during the duration of the podcast to make sure if there's any technical issues, they can hop in. I imagine like half of that cost though is just like space rent or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, of course they have to rent an office space, and then you tack on 20% profit margin, and before you know it, that's a lot of, and then you're charging them to rent the same microphones that you just use for everyone. So it's no wonder it's a good business. But yeah, I can see what you're saying, that has completely shattered the image of like, oh well, I just got out my microphone on my MacBook and suddenly I was Mr. Beast. All right, let's crack on with what we're actually here to deal with. So we're going to do some crypto copium takes for BTC and ETH later, but we've got to start with introspection, the most important, what is going wrong in the BCH ecosystem first, and also what is going right. So I have here 2 different takes, which are a bit long, but I'm going to read them. One is sort of pro BCH from Callisti, and one is a little bit anti-BCH from James SOB, reflecting on the way that BCH is currently at all-time lows just about against BTC, and we also don't have a ton of transaction volume, and yet here we are having this chat, probably the most optimistic, I would guess, between the 4 of us about BCH that we would have been in a long time. So there's been a bit of discussion about what's going on here. So first one, Callisti said, quote, there is no faction in crypto with more conviction than BCH's. Maybe Monero bros are close. Look, I'm not even being arrogant here. BCH has survived every catastrophe and every bit of FUD you can possibly throw at it. We survived 3 chain splits, endless propaganda, censorship and astroturfing, an entire exchange and sidechain collapsing, and our biggest whales capitulating. We've never been 51% attacked despite having minority SHA-256 hash rate. We've stayed solidly in the top 25 by market cap despite a dwindling ratio against BTC. We've shipped substantial beneficial upgrades every year since 2020, and it's safe to say we have some of the best tech in the entire industry. We're one of the only coins actually focused on real peer-to-peer commerce and economic activity. We've turned our community from a group of people who dwells in the pain of the past into a group that's optimistic and forward-thinking. We have some of the best developers in the entire space, creating some of the best, most user-friendly and practical wallets and apps in the space. Even the volume of trolls and haters are negligible now. We simply stay in our lane, shipping awesome stuff. More and more people are taking notice. The only argument left against BCH is a price/hash chart and a transaction volume graph. Don't worry, we're working on those too, smiley face. There's never been a better time to get into BCH than today. Don't sleep on us, green heart, end quote. So that's kind of, I would say, the BCH optimist position pretty well summarized, and this post obviously did ring true because it got a lot of circulation and views, like over 10,000, which is not like unheard of, but for an account of Callisti's size, that's definitely a top performing post. And then the sort of doubter perspective on the same phenomenon, I guess, comes from James SOB, who wrote this thing called Sunday Bitcoin Outlook about the BTC community. And he wrote a whole bunch of stuff, but we've just got this segment here, which is point 6, quote, BCH might have actually been right about the big picture, but in the critical moment, they didn't have the developer network effect or market recognition to capture Bitcoin's momentum. Even if they were right, and are still right, about some major conceptual issues for Bitcoin scaling, the ship has sailed. I hope I'm wrong on this, but BCH's market share will remain fringe despite being probably the most faithful continuation of what Bitcoin was actually supposed to be. In the same way that early internet pioneers thought we'd all be running easy-to-use SMTP servers, but instead we converged on the more dystopic outcome of all mostly submitting to Gmail's walled garden, end quote. So that's kind of two takes on the same thing. And Fiendish, you and I had been discussing actually this week. You were actually obviously having a bit of a bad day, and you were clearly like stressed about the price hitting a new all-time low. But I wasn't stressed because I think maybe we were seeing it from these two different angles roughly. I was thinking, look at all the things that are going right in the BCH community. We've fixed all these problems, and now we can sort of get around to price and transaction, count as like those were problems, but we just never had the bandwidth to solve them before now. And then I felt like you also, because, you can make your own comment, but you were sort of notably under stress. And sometimes that brings out the truth, is that you were kind of like, look, these are key metrics, and we're still underperforming on them, so we've got to be doing something wrong. And I feel like that is also a valid take. Are we doing the wrong thing? Well, if we're not getting the results we want, then clearly yes. And then it's a question of which metrics do you look at, and how do you figure out what's the right or the wrong results. So I'm going to start with you on what do you make of these two kind of contrasting opinions here?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to say that I wasn't stressed. It was talking about this disappointment that there's, it's a topic that we didn't really want to discuss at that point. But at that particular point, there is several people that I know who have been into the ecosystem for several years who are looking at this data, the KPIs, the key performance indicators of what direction Bitcoin Cash is going in. And of course, we have insights, deeper insights into what's going on into the community and what, the development that's happening, the building that's happening, the optimism, and why we are much more certain that Bitcoin Cash's future looks positive. But for anyone that's not within the ecosystem, all of the metrics that are visible, it doesn't paint that picture. This is my point. Is that how to change that. So, and this is something that I think is very interesting. Just taking up the one point, which is the transactions. So Callisti's post is fantastic, and I think Callisti very often hits it on the head. A very optimistic but pragmatic, realistic take on things, and I really appreciate his. I don't think I've really ever read him where I've been like, that's a really bad take, ever. Quite often is the complete opposite. But just looking at now, so Bitcoin is currently worth close to 300 times more than BCH roughly. And the question is, what's driving that? And if you were to say, well, it's money, which some BTCs still say, okay, it's money. So, well, what's the definition of like how important money is? Well, how often it's accepted, or how much it is accepted, how much people are using it. Right. Okay. And when we're looking at the transaction volume today, so Bitcoin BTC is at about 350,000 transactions a day, and BCH is 19,000. So what that means is that there's about a 20 times differential between the two chains. So we've got this ridiculously valuable high market cap chain that has amazing branding. You know, everyone knows Bitcoin. Everyone talks about Bitcoin. And it has got so much more money. It's got the banks, ETFs, MicroStrategy, or now Strategy, that's buying all of this Bitcoin at insanely high prices. But yet, and it's 300 times the value, right, of BCH. And yet its transaction volume is just 20x. There's a massive differential there. So if we take that as and I would say if it's money, that's a pretty important indicator of the value of the chain. And therefore, it would suggest, well, actually, if the transaction volume is valid, the BCH should be a 20th of the price of BTC. And I would argue, so it's very difficult to know with transactions, how much of it is spam. How much is it genuine transactions? And there's a lot of thoughts that because BTC is a high cost, that people won't spam it as much. And I would actually disagree with this assumption. It might be correct, but I disagree with it on the fact that there is a lot of incentives for the BTC network to keep the blocks full because there's the fee market. So why wouldn't miners pack in their blocks with transactions to themselves? Either they clear the transaction and it doesn't cost them anything, they get the block reward, or they don't mine the block. Okay, nothing lost. And for me, there's a lot of suggestions that suggest this, whereas on BCH, no one cares about this. They're going to use BCH because they want to, or maybe they're using cash fusion for extra privacy or something like that. But there's no real reason to be doing this or for miners to be playing this game. So I could imagine the Bitcoin Cash's transactions are more realistic and the BTCs are stuffed, in which case that 20 differential could actually be a factor of 10, maybe, of actual real economical usage. Could be. Is it, of course, it's assumptions. We have to make some assumptions with the transactional data. But there's a lot of signal here that actually the difference between BTC and BCH's usage is within a spitting distance. It's an order of magnitude. And so therefore the idea that taking James Obb, his point of view, that the horse is already bolted. Why? That would be my question. Based on what grounds is that the case? So I think that Bitcoin Cash and the usage of cryptocurrencies as decentralized payment networks, we haven't even started.
Because when you say that, okay, let's say that's 20x the amount of transactions and 300x the price. I agree with you. Maybe it's actually more like 10x the transactions if you do peer-to-peer payments between two people. That's being a little bit, that's a little bit of sleight of hand, basically, because there's no way to say, oh, okay, well, if somebody's minting a rune on BTC, which is currently like half the transaction volume, that's any less valid than somebody making a cash token thing. So we're playing into ourselves a bit, to make that.
But the point is that we don't know, and where it actually is, it can vary widely. And this is a thing, we don't have concrete information, so we shouldn't make too many assumptions. Oh, BTC has so many more transactions than BCH. Like, well, yes.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I agree with you. But then what that means is that the rest of the price differential is made up by things like the network effect, the branding, the liquidity on exchanges, the hash rate, which is related to the price in a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, the confidence and perceived sort of Lindy effect, where BTC and BCH both have Lindy since 2009, and BCH arguably has more because it's been under more stress during that time period. But on the other way around, people kind of think of BCH as coming from 2017, right? So if those factors are weighing out the rest, is your argument that, well, if we got the transaction, let's say if we drove enough transactions that we were equal in terms of the amount of transactions, that would then snowball into fixing all the other problems? Or are you saying because it's a small difference, relatively speaking, that's not the key thing?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. So I've seen this comment even by really old, original OG Bitcoiners that use Cash Fusion, generate lots of transactions. And I couldn't disagree with this more. We could have more transactions and it wouldn't affect the price. And, we could objectively look at this data just to look at BSV. Right. So one doesn't lead to the other. Now, if it's genuine economical activity, and of course, how do you measure that? It's very difficult, but we all know what it means. Are people actually going to shops and spending their Bitcoin Cash? Are people actually accepting it? Then yes, a higher transaction volume would lead to a higher price, but not because the transactions are higher. It's because it's being actually used more in the real economy. And this is the crux, I think. And thinking, like you mentioned several points there, and I'd like to break those down also at BLISS a little bit. It's like how do we succeed there, and how do we improve the situation? And you mentioned Lindy effect, and I think that this is also plays into this, from that same sort of mentality with the price of Bitcoin Cash. The main driving force, I believe, in my opinion, of BTC today is the fact it's got a long history of overall price increasing. And so people have an expectation the price is going to go up. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy up until that point where it doesn't. And where it doesn't, I think we all in this room were very surprised it went as far as it did, and seems to be continuing on that journey a little bit further.
Not surprised.
We'll get your take in a second, Emergent. Hold up.
And that's where Bitcoin Cash is obviously in a more struggling position there. And because the price when it started, there was a price explosion. So that people genuinely did believe that BCH would become Bitcoin and would be known as Bitcoin and would win that war. It didn't. And the price came down. And then looking over the many points over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, the price has been sort of in a sort of a range. And so when people are buying Bitcoin Cash, people wouldn't be, if you had the choice between Bitcoin Cash and BTC, if you're just doing it for financial gains and purchasing power gains, it would be a very hard sell. And so this is why, when seeing the ratio between BTC and BCH, because I see this is a very easy win. Because when the ratio between BCH and BTC turns positive, and there's BCH is growing at a higher percentage in its purchasing power per year, then all of a sudden there'll be very few reasons why people wouldn't buy into it. Who are buying it for that reason? All the people that are buying in BTC, of course they would, if they knew they could make more gains in something else and they were guaranteed that, or not guaranteed, but really, there was a good indicator that would be the case, they would sell. They would buy BCH. But of course, how do you drive that price increase? And that's all the stuff why we're so excited about Bitcoin Cash, because we're seeing all the projects that are happening, and we're seeing all the development that's happening, and people trying to create actual real value. So the reason why people want to go and buy BCH so they can actually use these products, use these apps. And I'll let John speak, but and we can come back to this maybe. And I think it's multi-pronged, because we've done it a few times in the Bitcoin Cash community, is encouraging people to take their BCH off the exchanges and keep it in self-custody. But it's very often a sort of a one-time thing and then it fades out. And I want to try and bring this back again as just a rhythmical, continuous thing. And I need to think about how best to do this, but just to really reinforce it in people's heads. You go to an exchange, you put your fiat on there or whatever token you've got or whatever crypto, and you want to buy BCH, you buy your BCH and you take it off into self-custody. Because I'm also quite convinced that if we got, of course, if we got everyone to do this, which is a wild, that's the dream world. But if you did, then any of the shenanigans that might be going on, such as naked shorting, would go away. Because if the price goes down, you buy your BCH, you try and withdraw. If the exchange doesn't have that BCH, then they have to buy it from somewhere. The price has to go up or the exchange has to go bust. One of the two.
Yeah, well, I want to hear Emergent Safe, but I mean, there's a lot of scope for us to figure out, like, what if we did, we do the upgrade on May 15th? What if we made it on the 15th? I mean, people are buying and selling BCH all the time, right? But what if we just made it a community meme that every month on the 15th, that was the day that you, like, buy in from your fiat or swap some of your paycheck, or you try and, whatever you're doing, you do more DeFi activity on that day. And we started to make, like, every month on the 15th, there was like a huge hit of like self-custody transactions being withdrawn from exchanges. And we started to make that, sort of like a rhythmic pulse. If we could make it popular and big enough, especially with people who actually withdraw into self-custody, would we start seeing ripples in the exchange? Like, we can even do it publicly. We can be loud about it, because if the exchanges figure it out and they have to either notice it, or if they have to start responding to it, then that kind of proves our point, right? And it would make it even more of a thing.
The price would basically, what you would expect is, even if you were to announce it, the price would always peak on slope
On
up
that
towards that point,
Yeah.
and then it would come down again. And the more that you can show that this is true, and this is why, like, I think it's a great idea, because the more you can show any sort of like truth to that statement over multiple months, you can say like, hey, we've got proof that this is happening, which encourages even more people to join in. Because hang on a minute, I want to join in. Like this, how high can we get this peak?
It's just trying to meme like a kind of bank run. Yeah. BCH bank run, 15th every month.
But it's like the opposite of a bank run, because rather than a bank that can't withdraw your money, it's basically it
is a bank run. We're blowing up the exchanges.
It's a bank run that benefits every single person that's holding BCH.
The reverse bank run. So the Knab run.
And I think we can do a lot more here, because I think even if we had all the apps in the world, if we do have naked shorting, which there must be, why wouldn't there be? Because it's really unregulated still today compared to the financial markets. Why wouldn't people be short selling? I'm pretty sure Binance are very highly likely short selling, because they're disclosing all of their crypto assets, their BTC and on chain, and it's all provable, but not Bitcoin Cash because of some technical challenges, right? Very, very, very dubious, right? It's just a UTXO chain. It's just very similar to BTC. Press X for doubt on that one.
Okay, Emergent. What's there's a lot of things floating around here, but give us your take on it.
There is a lot. I won't be as eloquent as Fiendish here, but you guys covered some of the important points. I'd like to reframe a little bit about the KPIs. It's a famous mistake to use the wrong KPIs. You get what you measure. You measure the wrong thing, you're going to get the wrong thing. And so, just like you were saying, are these the right things to measure? What are the right things to measure? And then in marketing and product development, there's leading indicators and there's lagging indicators. In price, For BTC, as you said, like that is exactly what BTC has done. It's the thing where the price goes up. That's really fundamentally what BTC is. And that's not fundamentally the thing that BCH is, although that would be helpful if it was, right? But it's not. And so the KPI for BTC and the KPIs for BCH are very different things. And it's one of those things where the people who know what's going on in BTC, Saylor, whatever you think about him, he understands what BTC is. And he understands what the real value of it is, which is not what the maxis often think it is. Saylor and BlackRock and those guys, they understand that BTC is a number go up thing. But when you look at BCH, you can't apply the same measures and think, oh, well, that's a leading indicator. It's totally the tail wagging the dog, and you're looking at the wrong thing and you're getting things in the wrong order, right? Because we're actually proposing to, hey, let's make this the chain that is used by millions and millions of people, eventually billions of people. And, that usage and utility is going to be the foundation of the value. These are two different things. So you have to measure them differently. But the other parts that you were saying about, getting people to take money off and that kind of thing, I was about to jump in and call Copium on you guys until the last moment, because what you were talking about was the very bad habit that people have had since forever, which is thinking about what people should do, which is a huge mistake to think about what people should do. You have to look at what they actually do and what you can influence them to do, perhaps. But the last thing that you said there kind of redeemed it, because you said, let's make it a game. Let's try to gamify this thing and let's turn it into a fun thing where it, causes something to happen, makes a social phenomenon of some kind. That's a valid thing, right? That's fundamentally a product right there, that kind of event. And so that would be something meaningful. But just being like, hey, people should take their money off exchanges. No. Because a lot of those transaction volume and things that BCH has are really the same as what BTC has, which is exchanges and people using centralized exchanges. That's a lot of what's going on there. It's not like it's fundamentally different between the two necessarily at a high level. So there's a lot of stuff going on BCH that's not going on BTC. But when you look at the fundamentals of where the price and so forth are driven, it's exchanges. It's 100% exchanges and centralized exchanges. So you can't you really can't fall into the trap of saying what people should do. You got to look at what they do, and then you got to create new things and create value and have people do things, solve problems for people, right? But there are also social phenomenon that you can create that you guys were talking about, which is a solid idea.
Can I just, before you go on, John, because I think what you said there is absolutely, I want to underline it and put neon writing on it, because I think that you mentioned something recently in one of the Telegram groups, which I also give 100% to, is it's people can have opinions on things, but one has to look at the reality, like how people use the chain or what they do, or how people go about their activities, is to not get too idealistic, I guess. I can't remember exactly how you phrase this, but it was just, I think there is quite a lot of desires of a particular outcome, and because of that, from several developers, builders, and because of that, they don't find their market. And then they're wondering why it's not happening. And I think that it's a really valid point. But as you say, gamifying it, because then
I can see the site if we have
having fun. It's a community event, and you can join in or not.
Yeah.
And this is a good way that basically we can have some fun. It works or it doesn't, but no one feels that, okay, we're being preached at again.
Yeah, like I can already see the website, BCH Bank Run, right, with a little counter or something like that.
Yeah.
You go on
that
there,
would
it
be
gives
fun.
you countdown to the 15th across the global time zone kind of thing. It hits that, and then maybe you go on, you buy on an exchange, you withdraw, and then maybe, obviously it's voluntary, you can submit your transaction ID to prove this is, prove, right? Anybody could just go on the blockchain and just copy them in, but just to get the idea going and show, and we could have a counter of like how many people had withdrawn, from an exchange, and see like what's the highest we can pump that number on the 15th, and then have a graph to see, oh look, the price did spike, or oh no, we're making shit all difference. Like either way, it would be kind of interesting to see, right?
Yeah, and there's one more thing I wanted to add, which is that it's easy to look at things in black and white and be like, it's this or that. But to a large degree, all the easy wins were gone 10 years ago, right? We lost that because of block size wars and the failure to maintain the Bitcoin name, the BTC ticker, whatever. Like that was a huge, huge loss. Of course, we've gained in other, from loss, you gain strength and you learn lessons that you wouldn't have otherwise learned. So yeah, sure, there's some things that we learned from it, a lot of things that we learned. But my point is, where we are today, it's even more than it was in the past, a thread the needle type of thing. And you can't be like, oh, well, we can't do number go up. Like that's silly. We can't look at that. Or we can't just focus on utility or whatever. Like you can't do one thing. We're going to have to do everything right to win, to succeed, right? We're going to have utility. We're going to have number go up because people get excited about it. We're going to have social success. We're going to have businesses that grow and become profitable. We're going to have everything, and all of those succeed to a large degree. So there's no like silver bullet that we can pick out and be like, oh, forget price, only do utility. Forget utility, all we got to do is pump fun, which we're going to talk about later, right? Like it's not just any one of those is going to make it. It's going to have to be all of them together to thread that needle.
Yeah, but the point is that it's a cycle, right? And they all play into each other, right? Yes. So what we're trying to figure out here is where to, like, obviously we're doing a little bit of all of them all of the time, right? But our job here is to try and figure out what is the weakest part of the cycle right now, and then put like a critical mass onto leveling that up, and then find another part of the cycle and repeat that, right? Yeah. It's just having that realistic, like you said, that big picture is great, but it's an easy cope to fall into, to be like, oh well, they're winning on that, and we don't need that. It's like no. We need to win on that also. We need to win on all these things.
I think what the just going back to the numbers go up thing. So this is BTC things, not at BCH's, and this is something. So yes, in the Germans would say Jein. So yes. But of course, what is the mid to long term result of people being more interested in Bitcoin Cash, buying it and using it either as money or using it on the for apps and the software, using it for any hedge or any of the other products that are on BCH? Is that we've got a limited supply of Bitcoin Cash. So when you raise demand, there's only one thing that can happen. It's a logical outcome of all of the entrepreneurs, all of the building that makes the ecosystem bigger, it grows the network effect. The price can only go in one direction.
I'm going to call a little bit of cope on that because I have said exactly the same thing in the past. But look at BCH Bull. It's not a incredibly vast amount, right? But continuously 30,000 BCH or more being pulled to a large degree off of exchanges and put into action in these long-term, not always, like many are short-term, but a lot of them are long-term contracts. That's an ongoing 30,000 BCH tied up in contracts on chain, right? Did that cause?
Yeah, but this is the thing, John. I would say you don't know.
We don't know. It could be a lot worse. Yeah, exactly. And so that's where
it could be a lot worse.
Well, that's
BCH.
we're coming full circle here because this was on this Imaginary said something like that on one of those episodes we did a long time ago. But I agree with Fiendish there, right? Like the fact that we're at this BTC BCH all-time low, I am not sitting here like stressing out about that. And the reason is because like we're talking about, we can see in the ecosystem how much things are growing, right? The metrics that I'm more interested in as things like podcast Twitter followers, podcast YouTube subscribers, Selene daily active users, how much chat I see in all the Telegram groups, how many new projects we see, how many new regular people pop up on, Twitter, Telegram, Reddit, in Fiendish and Friends, listening, whatever, that I see all that happening. And I know, okay, that's more where my KPI focus is. But we obviously need to get somehow better, like whatever effect we're having with all that growth on the price, it hasn't got past, the inflection point of the parabola just yet, right? So we've got to try and accelerate that more. And whether what we're currently doing is working, which I think is true. I think things are growing, things are heading in the right direction. Like as much as we're talking about the sort of negative aspects of this, there's like Callisti's post was 85% all the things that have gone right. Those are all problems that have been fixed. And most of those over the last 2 years, probably, being kind of generous, right? And then with the transactions and the price, it hasn't taken over that yet. But the question is, do we just keep doing more of what we're doing, or do we shift some effort to directly attacking the transactions and price? I don't know if you guys have thoughts on either of that.
I have big thoughts on that. So I've said for a long time, the biggest weakness, not weakness, but thing that BCH needs, right? The thing that it needs to improve on is entrepreneurs and growing the number of entrepreneurs building. And a big part of that is because I've given up on the idea that, I'll be able to predict the thing, or to say, oh, what BCH needs is, commerce, is retail, is savings, is a certain thing. And a big part of that, I've said before many times, but is the lesson of the Linux ecosystem, right? Where it's like, they're like, Linux on the desktop, we got to beat Microsoft. This was, decades ago. They're like, we got to beat Microsoft, beat Windows, be the thing that everybody uses. And that went absolutely nowhere. It's gone a little bit somewhere, like in the last 20 years or whatever, but fundamentally that went nowhere. And instead, it went off on this other direction where Linux took off in a niche that suddenly appeared and grew from zero to, trillions of dollars, the server market. And so that's why I think entrepreneurs are so important, because they're going to pick something, they're going to pick a use case. Somebody's going to find a really killer spot that BCH meets really particular needs and just fucking kills it. So that's what I'm really looking for, is that, because I don't want to presume that I know what BCH should do and what the KPIs are. I do have the mindset that we're entrepreneurs and we have this large amount of optimism and faith to some degree, right? That we know we're right fundamentally. We just got to find out how to win and how to make that real. And looking at the James, I love how you call him James SOB.
James SOB. James SOB.
But when you look at him, you see a common error that happens, from my perspective, an error, which is the Eeyore effect, right? Where some idea that you had has failed and it wasn't really reality. And you finally accept that. And then instead of being like, okay, what's next? You enter this depressive state, right? So he's clearly in this depressive state where he's like, I was all into BTC or whatever. And it's over, right? Everything is over. It's all going to fail. There's no way BCH can succeed or whatever. And that's a common thing to fall into when something you've been working on has failed. And I don't think we're anywhere close to that. We can still win.
But it's the same as the BSV guys. I mean, that's the irony, right? Is that you literally had, these civil wars with the Bitcoin community splitting. And when people in one fork start to feel like, oh, we fucked up and we've done the wrong thing, and when they finally have that moment of introspection, they don't say, wait, somebody told me that, like, enough that they really, really, really fucking cared about it, that they, went to the line on it. And maybe we need to think about what they were saying. Like, maybe they had it right from the start. We haven't seen really very much of that. Although to a certain extent, I am trying to bring that to BCH. That's what I have, ever since the show began. I spent so much time, it's now mostly done, but with dismantling the copes of people being, oh, the price doesn't matter, or we're just gonna, BCH is just gonna succeed somehow, and all these kind of things that people in BCH believe. I was trying to bring those ideas from BTC, which are correct. They're just my ideas. I just always believe them, right? But like, of course the price matters. Of course running nodes matters. Of course winning arguments on Twitter matters, rather than just, no, we'll prove it with on-chain volume or some bullshit like that. All these things matter, and we had to get those things right. And I think so far the BCH community has been the best about looking at those other ecosystems to absorb the pieces of the pie that we're missing. And my evidence for that is very obvious, which is that I've had Joshua Hensley on the show, I've had Ryan X. Charles on the show, talked to both of them. I've talked to Moonsettler a couple of times. We've talked to a bunch of those other BTC guys, right? Brian Harrington. We've had obviously Joel Valenzuela. He's not a BTC guy specifically, but different people from the crypto industry. Where are the BTC podcasts inviting me on? Has not happened, not once. Of course, it's the cone of silence, right? Because as soon as I go on one of them, it's over. If I am on one of those shows and I just rip apart either the host or whoever they get me to debate. There was even that girl who said recently, like, oh, do you want to let's do a debate about this thing, and I said, I'll do it, but I promise you're going to have a tough time finding somebody to do it with me, because there isn't anybody who knows enough about me knows that it would be a bad idea for them to get on a stream where I wasn't hosting it, so I didn't have to kind of play nice and could just tear apart the whole like hoax and everything, right? So, but it's the same. It's not just about me though. It's about everybody. And where is the BCH community people getting invited onto other stuff? It isn't happening at all, right? So I'm kind of losing that train of thought of where I'm going with this. But the point is, it's important for us to be introspective and bring in those ideas from other chains where we're missing things, because we are. Otherwise, we would be number one and the global reserve currency. And I'm not seeing that in those other chains. So basically, Emergent's answer was no, we shouldn't directly attack price and transactions. We should focus on attracting entrepreneurs instead. And then they, as a second order effect, will fix those other things.
Well,
Fiendish, do you have
everything? Everything.
Yeah.
That's just the top line for me. Yeah, everything, but that's the top one for me.
So I kind of agree. I think I mostly agree, but I see it. It's really multi-pronged, and I do see it as there's some things that are simultaneous. So as mentioned already, like trying to let's make the assumption that there is a lot of short selling on BCH. So if there was to actually be a concerted effort there, if something would be interesting, Jeremy, to actually look at, we can get something here going. With hey, this is the day, withdraw your Bitcoin Cash, bring it home. Maybe try if there's some way of getting token rewards for doing this or participating. So there's still private. No one knows how much BCH you've got, but hey, you get to still earn some tokens to sort of show that you're doing this. I think we could gamify this, because what I think is, I'm totally aligned with John. Like, we need more entrepreneurs in BCH. We need people to create value generating enterprises that there's customers, people that are actually like, yes, this is what I'm looking for. This offers me value. This improves my life somehow, whether it's entertaining, with Pump Fund or something similar to that, or something much deeper. And I think that this is what would really generate the entire, this is the thing will do everything, because we don't have marketing for Bitcoin Cash. Who should pay for that? Whereas if you're an enterprise and you have your own company, then you're marketing your own product, and that is marketing BCH indirectly, and then it's sustainable. It all makes sense. But how do you attract the entrepreneurs in the first place? This is where it's tricky, because of course, if it's not linked to BCH at all, so their product is just using the underlying technology of decentralized chain. There's loads, and how decentralized do they need to be? Maybe they can choose Solana. So it's kind of tricky to get those entrepreneurs on it. Whereas when you sort of think about, okay, I'm going to actually invest in the chain itself and be an entrepreneur. If there is signs of the price increasing because of certain actions, such as bring your BCH home, this can help that. This can help attract the sort of the entrepreneur that has been looking for, basically, because there are I know people that have invested quite a bit in chains because they do believe in the decentralized future and they want to build their business around that so that they can sort of fund their beliefs. And the reason why they don't come to BCH is because of that fear of the price action. So
I don't know. I feel like you're making it too complicated. We're just big apes, like big brained apes, right? People copy other people. People copy success. They see somebody successful and they copy it. So I think the answer to your question is in this room, right? It's people being entrepreneurial. Because, if you looked at my high school yearbook, Jesus, please don't try to do that. But if you did.
What year was that now?
Yeah, no. I would be at like the end of the list of like, this guy's going to be an entrepreneur, right? I would be like at the very bottom of that list. And so it's not like some kind of magical thing. It's just being entrepreneurial, right? So what you were talking about, and that's why I was saying that idea of like getting money off exchanges and gamifying it, as an idea of what people should do, terrible. As a gamification, that's a product, and that's being entrepreneurial. And so each of us, like taking the opportunity to find ways to make products, make something that people find fun or useful or whatever it is being entrepreneurial. And the more success we have, people are going to copy that. I don't think it's really complicated. It's like a thing where you just gotta make something for other people to copy, because we're like that, right? Humans are like that. You see somebody over there and you're like, hey, that guy's doing the thing. I could do that. I can do that too.
Well, it's like the 4-minute mile or whatever, any one of those famous examples
right,
where it was like
exactly.
believed to be impossible, and then one guy did it, and then the next year like 10 people did it just because they knew that it physically could be done. So then they're like, all right, no problem.
So I think the answers in this room is us.
Just to, I basically am aligned with you. I just want to sort of just make sure we're all aligned with entrepreneurial, because I think this idea is great and having a lot of fun there. But I would question whether it's entrepreneurial. So entrepreneurial, just characterized by taking financial risks in the hope of profit. And I think this is the key part. It's the profit. And this is what we want. We want people to be making profit, to really send that signal. Whereas, getting people off their money off the exchanges, I see this as a fun game, but this isn't something that would be directly linked.
The person who runs the site will make profit. That's the whole point.
Better.
BCHbank.com will sell some ad space, or it'll cost 5 cents to submit your proof that you were involved in that month's bank run or whatever. You get some I'm just trying to think. You get some token make some money that says I've submitted one of those, and then you can list your credibility on. I mean, that would be pretty cool if you could somehow list your credibility on Twitter or something as I've got 10 cash tokens because of all of the last 10 months. I have hit a withdrawal on the 15th, that kind of idea, right?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Right. So, okay. All right. Well, there's the next great BCH business idea. Anybody in the world, this is an open source idea. You could just go and build that right now. Of course, like I was talking about with Emergent at the start. If you don't do it, we will get around to it ourselves, but it's gonna take us a little while because we've already got plenty on the plate. Now, I just wanted to touch on. Yeah, go on, and also give us a bit of your thoughts. So, what do you make of all this as well?
So for my own Copium, I have no problems disclaiming that I do not pay attention to the price. I don't give a shit about exchanges. Everything that I do with cryptocurrency is based off of my day-to-day experiences. So if they're tomorrow becomes like if Monero becomes accepted at my superstore, I'm dumping BCH and going all in on Monero. However, that has never happened, and I don't
from the
have.
show 10 seconds later.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, listen, that would be fine because I don't think of it as this like part of the benefits of cryptocurrency is the ability to leave and rejoin whenever you want. So I don't think it's like this fixed thing. If a week after Monero becomes accepted at my supermarket, BCH is, I'm like, okay, well, I'll pause on the Monero stuff because this is my first love. Like, I'll go back here. So there's that. But then there's also like, I think it's easiest okay, hold on. How do I phrase this? I don't really talk to average normies about cryptocurrency unless it's in the context of like a complaint, almost like I have a problem in my life. I'm complaining about taxes or the government doing XYZ thing that I don't agree with. And I'm like, well, here's a way that you can kind of opt out of their system and use it as that tool. I think price for me is like the very last thing. It's kind of nice. A couple weeks ago, I bought some dinner with BCH and then the price dumped, right? And I was like, okay, well, that's no problem. Like, I'm going to get paid in BCH and then double down on these gift cards, come back with a profit somehow. Like, so yeah, I don't know. That's that. As far as
I
the
don't really
price
think
or
about
like
price
ratio,
that much either. Yeah.
yeah, I just don't.
Well,
really care.
I think of it in terms of like what Fiendish was saying, that business and entrepreneurialism is about profit. And that's the whole, like not the whole point, but that's one of the elements of this show, right? Is that I created it to demonstrate, like BCH Bull has, that I'm making money. Even if the price of BCH is going down, I'm making money. Why? Because people donate to the show. So it doesn't matter how much the price goes down. If BCH is still flowing in, that is my profit. Because if I couldn't make those donations doing, if I didn't do the show, I wouldn't make that money, right? So it's still a net profit basically for me, as long as though, like they say, Chinese Zhuang Chen, it's like money has to flow, it's not really about how much money you have in the bank. It's about your weekly income versus your weekly expenses. Really rich people aren't the ones who have, well, they are, of course, the ones who have $10 billion in the bank, but they didn't get there by saving like $1 at a time. They got it because they have this huge inflow of income and also a huge outflow of expenses, like a river running through their life the whole time, because they have to fund all these different things that generated them the income in the first place, right? So that's where I think of profit. And so I talked about this on Twitter a bit, and I wanted to get your takes, Fiendish. We were discussing this as well too, with regards to, like, I had the idea, I didn't have this, but for a wrapped BTC, right? I just sort of feel like, okay, the reality is, and we've all known this for a long time, but maybe we can just get to the crux of it here, is that we all know that there's going to be more pumping of the fiat price on BTC, even as we continue to see it become irrelevant as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Now, given that we know that, and that I'm even willing to put some money on that, but also I don't have any interest in buying BTC because I know it's a scam. I don't want to be involved in that. So if we give the better ways for the BCH community to just, hold basically some wrapped BTC, which you can either do like Moria USD, or you can do it with the, cash tokenized version of any hedge contracts. We already have today those two things. If they get just a little bit slicker and also better integrated into wallets, which is already happening, but will accelerate, between those two things, we can then have the BCH community stacking, BTC as well as stacking USD, quote unquote, so that the BCH purchasing power, even if the price is going down, the community resources are not constantly being decimated as a result. Now, in the end, of course, what is going to happen is that as you keep using those products, you drive more transactions, the community grows, and eventually, BCH is doing 10 megabyte blocks. The world wakes up that this is the future, and the flippening happens, right? But we don't know when that future is going to be, obviously. We know it's going to happen, but only on what time frame remains to be seen, right? So in the meantime, maybe we can just be savvier about, protecting our purchasing power. Because when we were discussing, you said to me like, oh, the price hasn't done as well as you said, and etc. And I was kind of like trying to defend myself, like, no, on this show we did we've done it even twice, maybe, the bear market survival strategy, how to DCA, how to diversify your assets, etc., etc. I don't think people should just be all in on BCH unless they very specifically, know what they're doing and their life circumstances accommodate that. And maybe we can just be better about the messaging for that. And again, it comes to profit. If people are holding 20% of their BCH wealth as a wrapped BTC and 20% as a wrapped USD, then even as the BCH price declines, or ratio declines, which is likely to do because of how much stuff is used to prop up BTC, will still kind of stay in the game that way. I don't know. This is just another line of thought. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of being able to, for people in BCH to remain in BCH, but yet be exposed on the upside to any other cryptocurrencies or assets, increase in purchasing power relative to BCH. And you said there, I didn't write it down, I'm paraphrasing, but that BTC price will continue increasing. So it's basically a very large expectation that the price will increase. And so you would also be very highly tempted to bet on that, but you don't want to be exposed to BTC. And I would applaud anyone that achieves this in a way that retains that value proposition. We discussed this because just taking the Morio protocol, which is fantastic. So you take your BCH as the base asset, you believe in this base asset, you don't want to sell it, because if you didn't believe in it, you would sell it. But I do believe in this base asset. So I believe in the base asset. I'm going to put it in, lock it up in a smart contract. I'm going to over collateralize it. So I put in 150% of the value in BCH, for example, and then I get 100% of that value paid out in USD, or Morio USD in that case. And what makes that particular circumstance works is because, of course, if you don't believe in the underlying asset, you wouldn't lock it up relative to the asset you're borrowing. And then there's enough liquidity because enough people are doing this so that you can easily exchange your BCH to the MUSD or vice versa without fluctuating the price. And that's a great system. And technically, you could do that with any other asset. And you could do that with BTC too. Technically, of course, it's identical. But where I see challenges there is just the simple fact that, your thoughts here on BTC's price will mimic the vast majority of people out there. And it certainly will mimic anyone in BTC. So that means, okay, a BTC, so they can't come and buy the MBTC token, so the tokenized BTC.
They can buy it.
But someone needs to basically take their BTC collateral and lock it in. But for me, that's an odd proposition, because I've got now my BCH. I don't want to sell it, but I'm going to swap it for something that I believe the price is going to go up. But that doesn't make sense. You wouldn't do that. You would sell it and buy BTC. So the incentive for someone to put it, what you would have to have is the only one that would collateralize their BCH is people that genuinely believe that in the time that they collateralize their BCH and get the token out, that the price of BTC relative to BCH will fall. Okay, yes. And how many people will do that? My guessing is it'll be a very small pool of people, which means you'll have very, very low liquidity, which will mean holding the peg will be very challenging, and the risk of liquidation is high. And I think the Any Hedge does a much better example of this, because the liquidity can be very low, but the premium solves this, because, okay, no one wants to take the other side, but then you have to pay a premium. Yeah, and for me, this is a much more stable thing, I think, than a BTC coin, because I think you're going to have massive liquidity issues there. But then the issue with Any Hedge, BCH Bull, to attract people from BTC is of course there's premiums, because lots of people are betting that the price of BTC will go up, higher than BCH.
They're not, though, actually. On BCH Bull, if you look on the ratio, almost always you can get paid to short BTC, or whichever way it is. If you're betting that BTC is going to outperform BCH on BCH Bull, most of the time you will get paid. You've got a negative premium. Most of the time, I've followed this for months, years. I'm sure that's the case.
Then I would say then it's already sold.
Exactly. That is what I was trying to tell you.
So many BCH.
Because BCHs are so bullish, basically. But
BCH is so bullish, yeah. But and if those same bulls,
BCHbull.com.
if those same bulls, were to go in and create a stable coin, and people could just buy this stable coin, and they didn't have. But then again, why would I get the stablecoin when I can go to BCH Bull and be paid premium?
Well, but that's the thing. Well, it might be more convenient, right? So I just want to address these two separately. So on the BCH Bull side, that's where the missing part is the tokenization, right? And again, this is something we'll see when it comes. But basically, somebody makes the contract, and then that emits an NFT, or maybe even a series of NFTs, or a series of fungible tokens, even that are like 0.1 BTC allocations or whatever, and then you can just trade those around, right? So then what that would allow is this joke that Callisti and I had about Selene, was that, we've made this amazing BCH wallet, and what we would do is we'd do a version where we just change the color of the logo to orange, and then we could go to, BTC conferences and onboard people. And when they said, wow, this is the world's sickest wallet, like, how did you do this? We'd be like, trolling them like, okay, actually it's a BCH wallet and you just use BCH, but you think it's Bitcoin because it is Bitcoin, and then blah, just as a joke, right? But that might be the actual answer. We already have the better technology, and the infrastructure, we're going to win at an infrastructure level, not at a brand level. Obviously, we're competing at the brand level, especially as the podcast and so forth, all the work that we all do gets bigger. But the fundamental advantage we have is at the infrastructure level is so much more cheaper and efficient, and it actually works because it hasn't been hijacked, right? So that's one angle that I can see us doing, and I don't know whether it would actually work. We should try it to make some kind of, like in Selene, if you could transfer cash tokenized BTC, wrapped BTC effectively, whether some of these guys that I argue with on Twitter would legitimately like give it a go and be like, yeah, you know what, maybe this is better. Like, my only argument against you, which they have left, is the price graph. And we just say, well, just hold the tokenized BTC and your price problems are solved. Now what's your objection? There will literally be zero objections at that point, except I don't want to, which is fine. But people usually, once they get to that point, they usually realize, okay, I'm just coping, right? But on the other side, when you were talking about the MBTC Moria version, you said, well, yeah, there's the premium on any hedge. There is essentially the same premium with the Moria USD. It's just hidden in a different place. It's the APY on the Cauldron swap pair. So when people, the reason that, even like you said, there might be relatively fewer people that would be willing to lock the BCH, expecting it to go up against BTC to mint the BTC in the first place. But if there's a lot of demand for that minted BTC, then that means there'll be high APY on people, and potentially even a premium on people wanting to swap from BCH into MBTC on Cauldron or on any other DEX, right? So that's why I was trying to say, like, it's still a market phenomenon. You still are always going to have a buyer and a seller. The question is just what premium and who needs to pay it to make the deal work, right? And so on any hedge, it's explicit, and that's how it already works. But the same is true on Moria. It's just the APY of the swap pool versus the collateralization of the token.
I'm not sure if I followed that. I mean, we just go through. So my understanding is someone puts their BCH, deposits it, and then they get out this MBTC. This MBTC is then sold on Cauldron DEX. When I go there to swap,
they stake it. They put it in the LP.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But for me, all I will be paying on Cauldron is a 0.3% fee. So I can swap my BCH for that value of BTC. So I'm not paying any premium here from myself.
No, but you could be if the peg slightly underperformed the whole time because of this demand. Like, what if the peg wasn't 1-to-1, it was 0.999 to 1, and that 0.001 was essentially the any hedge premium, right? Yeah. Also, if there is a lot of demand for, like you said, you're paying that Cauldron swap fee between the two, then that means those fees are being paid to the LP providers,
exactly.
Right? The people who locked up the coins. So for them to lock up the coins to get that LP reward, they have to mint some MBTC. So somebody has, if there's enough demand for the swap pair, it drives demand for minting on the collateralization end. And like you said, there will be a risk, but if there's enough demand for that swap, then it will create the profit incentive. Eventually at a certain
There's
point,
enough
somebody
demand
will want
for
to
that
mint.
swap at the price, and this is where I challenge, because of course, if the price differential is relatively low, then you might attract people from BTC. But if people from BTC basically they lose 5% of their value as it, or more, then the value proposition, I would say, goes quickly to zero for people from BTC.
But it doesn't, because that's where it comes full circle to what I was just saying about Selene Wallet, right? Because if you say to them, okay, you're going to get this, you're going to have to pay, let's say 1% premium to get your MBTC relative to just buying the actual BTC. But you don't have to pay BTC on-chain fees because now you're on the BCH network.
And so you've gone from holds it on in self-custody, which I would challenge.
Of course, which they don't. Of course, which they don't. But then that's a win either way, right? Either you're selling them, instead of paying the on-chain fee, you just pay slightly more. Like there would be a differential, right? You can still win if the on-chain fee is $5 and the difference is like $1. Let's say you're still making a $4 profit to do your transactions in BTC on the BCH network, right? Theoretically. And if they dispute that and they say, well, screw you guys, or I just hold on Coinbase, then you played yourself, right? That proves itself. So anyway, this is a very convoluted train of thought, but it's just me putting the idea in the heads of the BCH community that perhaps if we can be a bit better about,
do it.
Let's find out what happens. Yeah.
I want to double emphasize that, because what I've heard so far is 2 product ideas. And either one of those product ideas could be a huge flop, or it could be a massive success. And with anything that goes viral and takes off and becomes hugely successful, power laws come into play. Power laws is just the idea that, the small minority is responsible for a large majority of something. And that happens in all kinds of places. It's just like a universal pattern that appears everywhere in nature, including markets. And so somebody's going to hit one of those, right? Somebody's going to hit one of those massive hit viral type of products, and they're going to win big. And so I just want to double emphasize that there's been 2 product ideas here that nobody yet has implemented. And either one of these could be the one that just takes off, right? So yeah, keep going for it.
I mean, wrapped BTC on BCH would be a better L2 than Lightning. Right, there's no 25% chance that your $100 transaction would fail.
Way more amazing L2 than Lightning, yeah. There's a third one. Lightning on BCH. It's like, sure, if you want it.
No, but sure. All we need to do is mint a cash token and call it wrapped Lightning. And then there you go. Like people will be like, what is this? But anyway,
yeah.
One thing, Fiendish, I was going to say one thing. A lot of what we're talking about is retail and individuals. And something that is very rarely attacked from an entrepreneurial perspective is business use cases. And I think that's a huge open-ended thing. And that's where Linux won also as an analogy, right? Linux won not by attacking individuals and home users. They won in the end by accident, by absolutely dominating the business use case. Yep. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity for solving business problems, because businesses are more sensitive to the kind of benefits that BCH offers today, right? Not the ones later when there's a huge network effect, which everybody wants to get on board. But today, when there's things like prices, price differentials, there's efficiency, there's costs, there's infrastructure, there's all these little things. Businesses are way more sensitive and rational about those things, not perfectly, but more rational than individuals. So I think there's plenty of room to find solutions to solve in the business area as entrepreneurs. So, but yeah, there's lots of room.
I still have the question that I had 20 minutes ago.
All right, well, let's have it. But we gotta up the pace here, because this is a lot of good chat, but we're not getting through the
slide 3, no 7.
Yeah.
The KPI of slides per minute is falling.
Is low. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good thing.
I expected more from you.
No, but see, this is the thing. Ironically, this is actually kind of perfect, because I wanted to do this show, and I was like, look, we got to talk, first things first, we got to talk about BCH, and then we'll get in the dunks about the BTC and the ETH guys. But if we don't get to that, we don't get to that, because the whole point is, like, why do we, the criticism would be, why do you guys have time to point out all these other, bullshit in these other ecosystems? Shouldn't you be busy enough with your own ecosystem? And the thing is, we're actually getting to the point now where we definitely are. It's not like we're short on content or, interesting stuff to discuss without that. Although I do think it is helpful to keep, my listeners in the loop about what's going on in the rest of the scene if they're not, obsessed with it like I am. Anyway, Jet, let's hear it. What's the question?
Yeah, okay. So this conversation has mostly revolved around financial and digital products. But aside from like IOZeta, who I'm pretty sure is now like gone, and Paytaka's vending machine, and like obviously the crypto ATMs that have a 25%, markup on either side, what are like hardware products? Because I think those are the most attractive things to the average person. Like, they don't give a shit about, the software that their computer's running as long as it works. They don't really care. They've, like, most people, have less than a paycheck of savings in their bank account. So the financial tools aren't really of much use to them. What physical thing can we introduce to people's lives? And like, what examples do we have?
Can I put my hand up here? Can I answer? Can I start with this? This is a great question, and it's something I've given a lot of thought to. So my wife. So first of all, my wife is desperate for us to buy a little place in the local town where we have basically it's just BCH only. Where you can use the vending machines and the coffee machines and snacks and supplies. So basically all of the students and the colleges and something that's quite exciting, but that's what Paytaka are already doing. So what else could it be used for? There are many things that can be solved with hardware and using Bitcoin Cash. 24-hour gyms. So 24-hour gyms is something that you could access, you could pay for, and the send the money to the transaction, the lock opens for you to be able to go in. You could have the similar sort of things for hotels, or motels would be better. Where you just want to go into your room, no one's able to open up the door for you. You pay for your room, you literally open the door and you go in, and then you can sign your in your wallet to open that door again for 24 hours or however long you paid for it. So there's, I think that there's lots of things that the blockchain and BCH can be used for with hardware. And Jeremy knows I've mentioned one. We have a show like this when you're doing gaming or something like that. You could even just have a little electric node attached to you. Gotcha. Someone sends money to it. Well, raising for fun and games, or lighting up, light bulbs and stuff like that. This is all can be done with simple hardware, simple module that's just looking at the blockchain. So yeah, that's my take on that.
I remember the first hackathon where you were there, Jet, and that's when you were just learning C, I remember back in the day. And one of the other projects at the hackathon was a remotely paid vibrator. Yeah. So that was the project that I worked on. There was one hackathon before that one. Yeah.
and I'm still interested in BCH hardware all these years later. Still wants to make
it work. Jet's like, anyway, I wanted to talk about vibrators and the BCH.
Okay, so the very first hackathon, I was trying to essentially mimic IOZeta. And so I didn't get a working product. I didn't end up printing the little... sorry, viewers, you're not going to see this, but printing the little shell that I need to actually get the candy to come down. But I got the thing, like the blink test, essentially. And that was like, okay, obviously this is easier to interact with the blockchain than any other form of payment for something like this. So like, I think that, actually, Aaron, if you are listening to this, we need an update. What have you been up to?
Yeah, that's what he's been working up, the point of sale kind of hardware device, like a BCH specific one, could be killer for rollouts, because like when you go somewhere like Townsville, I know Jason there, he has a hell of a time with the fact that he gets them all set up with tablets and all this gear, but then they lose the charging cable, or they put it in the back room, or they've whatever, it needs a software update, or bitcoin.com register app hasn't updated, or something like that. Just a million and one problems Whereas if they had something that was already came BCH branded in green, with like one button, like turn it on, type in amount, and then gives you a QR code, it works every single time, etc., etc. That's another banger idea. Of course, we haven't had anybody successfully deliver on that, but it's just another case of we're not short on ideas, just short on shipped execution. Basically.
Yeah, it's the execution. So Aaron's been working on that since 2021, I believe, and it was great already when I saw that in 2022. I really, so it's just, and he's taken it really far. He's even executed, but 90% of the way, it's just go to market. That's the hurdle.
The biggest hurdle is going to be scaling up production, right? Like, I'm pretty sure his team is like maybe 4 people, and the like embedded engineer
the biggest challenge is validating it. The biggest challenge is validating the product that it meaningful and people need it. That's what he needs to do.
Needs to come to BLISS, try it out with 3 modules, and then he'll have pre-sale orders to fund his building and distribution and marketing if he needs it. But anyway, maybe.
But the answer to your question, Jet, is entrepreneurs. Okay, people taking the idea of a hardware device and taking it off and executing it.
All right. We got to move on. TapSwap.cash. Okay, so as we're sitting here trying to figure out how to drive transactions, how to get more interest in BCH entrepreneurialism, we have a classic or a perfect example from this week. BCH Autist and mainnet Pat collaborated to release this week on TapSwap.cash/pump a clone of pump.fun, which is a popular Solana token launch pad. So basically what that means is anybody can just sort of fill out a little form to launch a new cash token. So this is a website it's a cash token website that lets you make more cash tokens. And after you do that, it locks up the initial supply on a curve similar to a DeFi yield curve, so that basically it's like an ICO. People can buy into this initial coin supply, but of course, as they go up, they are essentially paying higher rates, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. I think there's no fixed price. So the later you get in, the higher the price you pay, which in a kind of Ponzi scheme way essentially funds the people below you, because then they can then cash out at exactly. They can cash out in the liquidity on the new price. And then if you hit 80% of the supply up this bonding curve, then the software automatically pays out the person who created the token. It's like a 3% or 5 BTC or something like that.
0.5 BCH.
Okay, you get half a BCH if you create a token which takes 10 seconds and you somehow shill enough people into it to hit the 80% level. So there's an immediate profit incentive for the creator. And then on top of that, it also puts some of the remaining supply into a pool in Cauldron with the rest of the funds, so that then people can already speculate even further. So that's the whole idea of the launch pad, trying to get things to this critical meme mass. Of course, it doesn't have to be used for just trading memes. You could do this like the Fiendish token that you do on Fiendish and Friends, or we've talked about on this show, we could have a token, or any other kind of token, whether it was a scam or not, you could do it. But the first use case is, of course, gambling and scams. What do we make of this new innovation, Fiendish? Have you been pumping it on TapSwap?
So first of all, just a little plug. So mainnet Pat, he's actually joining Fiendish and Friends next Friday at 12 o'clock. And one of the topics is going to be this TapSwap.cash/pump and the pump tokens. So I think, it's the kind of thing. So for me personally, the whole meme coin pump and Onyx, it's not my thing. But what I if you look at Solana, this is the meme coin chain, right? So they've got a lot of interest from people that are speculating on these meme coins, and I think Bitcoin Cash has this amazing long-term vision, but what's the short term? And stuff like this, like different way. For me, this is just entertainment. That's the way that I see this. This is entertainment. If people gamble on this and have fun, and I guess most people that'll be betting on this, they're going to be betting, not so much, huge amounts of money. then it might pull in a lot of fresh eyes. There was already 20, I think, tokens launched on this by the end of the day, and I looked after it was released. I looked in the sort of how much had been sold, and it seemed like there was quite a bit of activity in there as well. And so I think this is something that interests people in the crypto world. Is it something that I will be degenning on? I put my hands up and say no. I'm gonna be honest here. But I really, I hope a lot of other people have fun with this, and then it brings in a lot of fresh eyeballs into BCH, and that some of those eyeballs stay around and think, okay, this chain's fun. Let me see what else the ecosystem has to offer.
Emergent, what's your take on this?
Exactly the same. Yes, Fiendish.
Okay.
Well, different things to say about it.
let me throw in a different element to this then, which is, what do you make of the fact that having this kind of project be created? I mean, we're here talking about all these different ideas we have. At the same time, we have to acknowledge what are the ideas that are getting proof of work behind them to actually exist, right? Is that, to me, I also will try this out and I'll have a bit of fun with it. Well, okay, so maybe not like you guys. I actually will be speculating on this a little bit because I enjoy that kind of thing. But really, the important part for me here is twofold. Firstly, that this is a sign of the BCH community, like I was talking about before, looking into other ecosystems, what's working, let's copy that, right? You have to have that humility to be able to learn those lessons, right? And not think not invented here syndrome or whatever, right? So, I think it's a good sign that we're doing that. And that's also a result of the community having enough bandwidth internally that we're not too busy solving all our own fires. We've got time for some new stuff, and some of that is original and some of it is copied from somewhere where it's already working. Of course, I think for it to then get traction, it probably needs something more than that. It needs to iterate the concept so that it's more than what you can get on the original chain. Otherwise, it's just a clone, with less network effect. So there's that element to it. And there's the other element to it, which is that the release of this product shows how developed the BCH infrastructure and tooling has become, right? Because when you think through how many layers of things we've had to get right for this product to appear, it's a lot. It's like the scripting upgrades, the cash tokens upgrade, wallet connect, the integration into the wallets. Then obviously BCH Audist and Pat did the research and the mathematics, and that's not like anybody just knocking that out on their lunch hour, right? So you've got to have all of those things in place before this kind of a product can appear. So sort of in tangentially to what we're talking about before, I think this is evidence that we're doing right in creating the environment that entrepreneurs need because of this kind of complicated product emerging. What do you make of that?
Absolutely. That's where GP started, back in 2019 with there was practically speaking, no infrastructure. The infrastructure that was there soon went poof and vanished. There was no libraries to work with. So yeah, we had to build a lot of this stuff that we're working on from scratch. And then LibAuth also came along, which has been extremely helpful as underlying infrastructure. And yeah, as you build up those layers that we've definitely participated in building up, then you start to be able to actually think, oh, I want to make a new product. I want to do this thing. And you can actually do that instead of, oh, I want to do this product and I'll have to build the whole mountain underneath it. You're not at that point anymore. So yeah, absolutely. You're right about all the infrastructure and it being a sign of there being a maturing infrastructure available to build products on top of. Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah, I agree very much with what you're saying there, Jeremy. And I think it's testament of the energy and the resources that we have in BCH to do this sort of work. And I think you're onto something there. Thinking about the chain. So absolutely, we should be looking at successful chains and have the humility to see whether it aligns entirely with the, maybe the core values of what BCH stands for. It doesn't matter, because this is people are attracted to this. Does it have any detrimental features to Bitcoin Cash as money? No. not at all. And so, this is just something tapping into that.
People could argue the reputation, could argue, okay, if we become known for having a lot of scams, it sort of sinks our legitimacy.
Yeah,
That's the kind of criticism of Solana.
Yeah, I've heard this. I, to be honest, I don't buy it. I think it depends on the people. So, of course, if big people in Bitcoin Cash are promoting the use of certain meme coins and those crashes, those people will lose reputation, and therefore also then the chain can lose reputation as a proxy through them. I think this, but Solana is an absolute scam fest. But people still, really have a high value of Solana and respect for it as a chain. So the activities on the chain, I don't think undermine the chain itself. But I think you mentioned a really good point, though, is like BCH needs to sort of keep up with the market. It can't be falling behind. So, it doesn't have to be the best, but it does have to keep up. But what you say is really important. Like, will it drive mass usage if it's not offering something novel over the Solana? And you said, no. It will drive some usage and it will have some fun and it will, and it's good to have. But it's the novelty. Why are people interested in buying meme coins? Of course, it's making some money. It's also the whole novelty factor, the whole gambling thing. That's why there's all these different kinds of machines and different lights, because it's novelty. You want to make money, sure, but it's the novelty of how you make or lose money that gets people keep coming back. And then it'd be interesting to see where this goes. I think we've got a lot more of that brain power now. So we're doing that step. We're releasing products that are on other chains, but there's also the thought process, and that's what I'm interested to see is how can this be taken one step further. How can we use all of this technology to offer something that is novel? And again, it could just be pure gambling. It could be pure speculative, Ponzi style system, but it's still in a new way and in something that's catching the average Solana person. Because if we could tap into 1% of Solana degens, that's a lot of money that could be coming in the direction of BCH. And I think that all the money that comes in, for whatever reason, that's wealth that can be then spent in continuing that building out, as you say, of all these different, the stack that's enabled all of these products to be built.
Yeah.
So, I want to say, it's a danger for us to talk about it like we understand how these things are going to play out, because we don't. And for an entrepreneur who wants to try something, like Pat and Bitcoin Cash Altus, they want to try something like Pump Fun or whatever, there may very well be some significant difference that's not immediately obvious. And in hindsight, we'll be like, oh, yeah, well, obviously, for example, scale. Scale is a magic all on its own. And if there's something that worked really well and was really popular, and then it just kind of fell apart because things became unreliable or they didn't scale, they became expensive, and then the exact same thing is available somewhere where it does scale very well, that may be enough, right? So you don't want to put limits on yourself too much when you're taking risks as an entrepreneur. You do have to make a choice on what you think is going to win and where you're going to make money. But I just wanted to warn against anybody who's listening. You got to decide for yourself if you think it actually might be a big deal and you might win.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but I think scale is more of a force multiplier, rather than an initial reason to drive interest, right? So, I mean, I think that's where all these people were sort of like, well, BCH is going to win circa 2018 just because BTC will jam up and it will be the same but cheaper and faster and more scalable. It didn't happen because it was just one option of 1,000, which could all offer that, right? A lot of people can offer pump.fun clones. That's where I'm saying if we have a new spin on it, or if this then turns into people using these to launch the MBTC token that we were talking about before, that's how you find your initial investors to get your Moria BTC, first 20 coins funded or whatever.
And ensures a certain amount of liquidity going onto Cauldron, right?
Exactly.
So there's definitely some interesting concepts here that can be used for actually very high value projects and products.
Yes. So it's just this, or maybe some combination with Flipstarter or FundMe. There might be a way that can work. Maybe I could just do the next. We've got 3 more episodes, and then we're up for our next round of FundMe. Maybe I'll do that, and maybe I'll also do a scam coin launch here, and just be like, I've got all the bottom of the bonding curve. Like, if you want to support the show,
GA podcast scam coin.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I'm just just thinking out loud. But anyway, I think it's interesting. I think it's good that our ecosystem is developing, copying ideas. Like you said, Fiendish, if it works, it works. And while we don't necessarily want to be the community, everybody focused on gambling on coins as efficiently as possible, that is going to happen. And so better to be the place where people do it than not, I would say. Okay, let's quickly touch on the chips. Of course, you're both so deep in the ecosystem. I have to get your thoughts. We talked about this the last couple of weeks as well too, so I'm not going to go over it all again as well. But there's TX V5, potentially 2026 loops op eval and pay to script, and then 2027 maybe TX V5. I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that. Fiendish, I know you were talking to Jason Dreisner actually recently, so people can go and listen to your chat with him. But from my overlapping audience, did you have any takeaways or thoughts from that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Jason is very much looking at the long-term vision of Bitcoin Cash. And so he's really, this transaction version 5, one of my big questions was, why is it such an omnibus? And he agreed, yeah, it could have been split into 3 smaller chips. And the idea wasn't that it was to be accepted under any circumstances. It was really if we were back into the top 10 and looking like the progression that was needed, the usage that was needed was going to be happening, to justify it was going to be happening soon. So for me, from a technical understanding, I wouldn't be able to say so much, and I'm sure John will be able to say a few more words here. But some of the things, I really like the fact it's a long-term vision. And I was speaking with Matthew Goikens in the last Fiendish Friends, and I agreed with him that we're going to see updates to Bitcoin Cash forever. It will be an ongoing project. But I really, where I don't see quite the same as how easy it'll be to do those upgrades. I think once we have mass usage, doing significant upgrades such as this will be very, very challenging and may take many, many years to get buy-in, maybe decades. So it kind of makes sense to do it earlier if you think this is what's needed to grow to that global payment system. But at the same time, doing such big changes when you're changing the transaction, like we'd have to basically every single person that's accepting Bitcoin Cash would have to change their coding to be able to accept Bitcoin Cash. That's a huge ask, and you may actually kill the project dead. So that's a serious risk that shouldn't be just hand waved away. So getting the timing of that sort of implemented at the right time, if it passes the consensus, and once it's ratified, I think we should be very cautious of implementing this too soon, but at the same time, we shouldn't just wait for 10 years as well. So maybe, for me, this is something that sounds, I would guess this is something for maybe in 8 or 9 years. I don't know, but I have a feeling that this isn't something that should be implemented in the next few years. But that's just my take.
That's the TX V5. Do you have any thoughts on the ones that are more immediate, the loops?
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I mean, loops looks really exciting. So I'm very interested by loops. And from my technical understanding, I'd hope that this gets in next year for making developers, builders' lives much easier. So this is a feature that anyone that develops uses and makes code easier for them to understand and readable, and also shorter. So yeah, and op eval and P2S, I would say for me, I need to read more into this to sort of make a distinction of where I think this should be implemented next year or not. I can see some benefits, but I can also see some risks, and I would say I wouldn't want to say anything more than that.
Emergent, where are you at on these potential chips?
Yeah, they're very interesting, and similar to what Fiendish was saying, I totally agree that Jason has this. And he's not the only person involved, but he's obviously the big mover, right? He has this very clear vision for the Bitcoin Cash, especially the Bitcoin Cash virtual machine, which is, like the heart of transactions and how they work. And he has a pretty long-term vision for that, which is fundamentally making a very powerful and efficient engine that lets you do whatever you want to do with programmable money, right? That's very centered around money naturally and lets you work with money in a natural and efficient, powerful way. And I love that vision. the specific chips that are out there, the smaller ones that are not the transaction version, well, really for all of them, my fundamental take on those is that my view of the chip process is that by default, the answer to any kind of proposal is no, is like the default, right? Until you've like really been convinced of it. And a really big part of being super convincing is that the benefits are massively obvious and the costs are extremely reasonable and low, right? That's like the starting point. If you can achieve that, it's like a big win, right? And if you can't, then it starts to become much more questionable. And from an engineer's perspective, there's a real danger in continuing to build architectures and layer things on top of each other and just like keep moving forward when you haven't proven it yet. And so the idea of like making things easier for developers and better and so forth is a good concept, right? But I don't buy it until I see people struggling with those things specifically and being like, hey, we have this product and this product is what works well and it has proven demand. And we're really struggling with these things because the virtual machine can't do this, this, and this. And this is where General Protocols was years ago, right? Where we were like, hey, there's these proposals out there like PMV3 and others. And we were like, they would make our lives better, but we're not convinced yet, right? It's not yet to the point that these are things that we want to put in forever, because these are with consensus changes, right? You make the change and more or less they're forever, right? It's a one-way street. You don't come back from it. And those are very, very serious decisions to make an engineer. And so, yeah, my perspective is kind of like, we need to validate the VM that we have because it's already very powerful. We need to validate the VM that we have apps built on it, businesses built on it, protocols built on it, have usage start happening more and more. And as we start to really see like, these are weaknesses and these are strengths, then we know what kind of things you really need to build. And as an engineer, until you have that, you should never have confidence that you've nailed the perfect design, right? Because there's always another way to design things. So yeah, I'm not super like in an urgent, not feeling urgent about implementing these until we see more products and protocols in action.
Yeah, so essentially for the listeners there, the argument you're making is that basically we need to let the pot simmer a little bit and then observe the real world results from people making things like TapSwap, pump clones or wrap BTC or whatever. And then we'll start seeing in the dev channels, people being like, this is the problem or that's the problem. And to just tie this together, that's what happened with the VM limits chip that we have for this year came from people building Cauldron, building Cash and Eyes. Those kind of projects were the ones that then drove the need for the VM limits. And so you're just saying, well, maybe, we give it a little bit more time this year, potentially next year as well, to see those projects run into those walls for real rather than because they
or even get close to them, right?
Yeah.
Like even approach, because again, we're in the position as General Protocols where some of these proposals, we could directly make use of them, right? I know exactly how I would use them. And I have serious doubts that there's a significant number of people who think, oh, these sound nice, have specific use cases that they would make out of them. I think there's a very small number of people who could actually do that. And I'm one of them. And even though I'm one of them, we're in the same position as before with introspection and big integers, where we said, let's see what we really need and make sure that these ideas are super mature and like super obvious wins and super low cost to the greatest degree possible before we really jump in there, because it's a one-way street.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I'm sort of on the more with Fiendish in the sense that I think Loop sounds like a slam dunk to me. Again, like it's just so obvious that I can see that one specifically being a huge win. Although you're right, I don't have an exact app that I would go and make with Loop, so that's a fair.
Of all of them, Loops is the ones that we could make use of, and so Loop would be the closest to an obvious win. Yeah. But the others, like a transaction version change is a holy shit change, right? Like Fiendish was saying, that's a massive risk. The benefit better be colossal to doing that.
Yes. Well, anyway, we've got plenty of time. That's the whole point of the chip process. And maybe even just to quickly touch on, because you guys are both so deep in the weeds with this, that again, sort of similar to the pump stuff, where I said, okay, we've got the product and then we've got at the meta level, people are building that stuff. What about the meta layer of chips? Like, we were thrilled, I would say, to be at BLISS last year, 2024, talking about the 2025 upgrades. We're now in early 25 talking about, 3 months from BLISS, talking about the 2026 upgrades already, and then potentially even the 2027 upgrades. So the timeline horizon does seem to be expanding. The furthest bleeding edge of the research
It's amazing.
is getting further and further ahead of what we're actually doing.
Yep.
Give me some thoughts on that.
Who's that question to? Sorry.
Well, either of you, what do you?
Okay.
I don't know. Is there any especially thinking about that panel, that we had at BLISS? Yeah,
I think it's a great question, because this is something that the whole chip process for me, I may see this differently than developers in Bitcoin Cash. I don't know, but I agree with what John said here, but I think that there's so many stakeholders. There may be there's entrepreneurs that are literally looking for that best chain, and they'll be interested in such discussions because they are looking for something like this, and then their stakeholders are not actually in BCH today, but they'll be nevertheless involved in this. And I love the fact that these conversations are happening because, as John has already said here, the chip, when a chip is proposed, the answer to that is no, it's not going to get implemented, and you have to prove that really there is a value here. And then through the vast majority of players within the ecosystem, and the fact that these are discussed so early, as Jason said, he would like this maybe to be implemented in 2027, but maybe 28, maybe 29. But the whole point is it's out there, and people can start looking at asking those questions. Do we need this? Does this add value? Maybe there's some good ideas within here. Maybe there's some not so good ideas, but then you can build upon that. And the fact that people are taking this time to do this in a really relaxed and calm way, and really looking, thinking long term. And also, as John says, you can try and build a chain for 1,000 years, but you can never imagine what people are going to be doing in 5 years, let alone 1,000. And I think that's a very valid point. But the fact that people are having these discussions with a lot of time to really think about this and what it means and to go into the details, I think this is a great state of the ecosystem. And I much prefer where we're at today with that than thinking about 2021 or previous, where it was either there was not much going on, or what was going on was sort of happening at the last minute, and it was all very tense, and which isn't the way we want to be. So I like this. I think this is good.
It was beyond tense. It was oppressively oppositional. It was nasty. Yeah, it was not fun at all before, and it was anyway, we were in such a better condition today, and optimistic and looking forward and looking for ways to move ahead, and avoiding ego battles and other silliness. I wanted to say, just in case it comes across like what I'm saying as, no, like, I really mean it when I say we have to thread the needle. You've got to do things just right. And of course there's room for error, because there's no such thing as perfect, but we do have to thread the needle, and that means you got to do things fast enough, but not too fast. And that sounds simple, but that's a really hard balance to strike. And so, do we rush ahead a little bit, or do we hold back and see how things go? I'm obviously not the one making the decisions, but I do make the decisions for how I do things, and to some degree how General Protocols makes decisions. So yeah, we have to hit it just right. There's no comfortable spot where there's an obvious answer to these things. We are going to have to make some hard decisions about what to do and what not to do on the protocol level.
Well, but it does emerge sort of organically as we go along, as time progresses, more research comes out, and more, everything's going on at once. So it does all kind of come together in a nice organic way. So I don't think, we need to be too stressed about that. But it's interesting. It's interesting to watch, because I just see the timeline extending further and further. And I'm just thinking, okay, by the time we're doing this show next year or the year after, we'll be talking about, the chips for 2035 or something. Like, I can just see that maybe there's a point where it goes even too far, that chips are this, ivory tower, like, speculation that is completely divorced from what's actually going on. But maybe there's no limit. I don't know. We'll find out certainly how far ahead you want to be running the potential upgrades.
I actually think just a little point that I don't want to speak for Jason, but I think I know a little bit about how he thinks, and what I believe his perspective is that there's a certain number of things you need to do, like fundamental things, the protocol, to make it this long-term vision. And beyond that, there's not so many things to do. So I don't think he actually thinks there's going to be a huge number of chips like ongoing like 30 years into the future. I think he thinks there's some fundamental changes to be done. And then after that, it's going to be game time is how he probably sees it to a large degree.
Yes and no. Like for his specific chips, yes. But that's not true of chips because then, he's not out there. How are we going to solve quantum resistance? Or he's not in the thick of UTXO commitments and several other things, right, that the community overall is going to crop up with in regards to specifically the VM and his ideas for that, then I can sort of agree with it. But then in that sense, we've already bought ourselves a nice amount of time because the previous upgrades that we've done have been so good and done so well that we're already a lot of the way there, right? So I guess that's also to your point that there's previously it's been like, okay, we got to get some more urgency going, and now maybe it's like, okay, let's just taper that off a little bit because we're in a nice moment where we're already ahead of the game, so we can afford to be a bit more measured.
Or focus resources on building instead of upgrading, right?
Instead of just more protocol stuff. Okay,
which is actually what I tried to hook Jason in is that question. Can we get you moving actually to the entrepreneurial side of the building the apps? And
I would love to see that.
That would be fun. So yeah. Let's see.
We'll see where we can get. Okay, all right. So we've done plenty of BCH. I feel we've been plenty self-critical. Now we can have a little bit of extra fun looking at what's happening in the rest of crypto, which is, as always, a delightfully amusing shambles. First off, we have the Ethereum community who, like us, have been suffering from a declining ratio against BTC. But unlike us, they don't have the mentality of we're actually going to fucking take them out at any and all costs. They instead have a lot of people who are like, I came to ETH because the flippening was the thing and my number went up and I got really excited and a bit rich, or I saw other people get rich. They've got a much more, we've got to make money ethic as compared to the BCH community's, more mission-driven kind of vibe. So this ETH BTC ratio declining has been a big deal, and it's created a lot of stress and arguing in their community, especially because they have the Ethereum Foundation. So BCH, of course, doesn't have that because we're actually decentralized. But back in the day when Bitcoin.com was a bigger part of the ecosystem, that is where people would point to and say, why doesn't Bitcoin.com build my greatest new idea? They're the ones with all the money. Why don't they just do it? And of course that has changed over time. They faded out of the scene a little bit more. Other people have come in, and also the community have realized, they're busy doing what they're doing. Like, it's up to you if you want to build whatever you want to build. But in ETH, they still have this huge pot of cash from the initial pre-sale, which the community, in quotes, feels like it owns, that gets to decide a lot of what goes on there, right? So they had a lot of drama because if the ETH BTC ratio is going down, that's basically like the shareholders are seeing the share price go down. And so they go to the board and say, guys, what the fuck are we doing? And it's not working, so we got to change something. So Vitalik said that he unilaterally was going to change the ETH Foundation leadership, and also in a way that a lot of people didn't really approve of. I don't know all the details. I really am not this deep on all this. But this lady, something, is like heavily involved, and Vitalik likes her, but basically nobody else does, as far as I can tell. So that's, of course, just revealing the whole criticism that ETH is actually just a company, basically, because when their ecosystem is in strife, they go straight to ETH Foundation, please save us. And then Vitalik, why aren't you telling the ETH Foundation to do what we want? Basically, that's not even just the extent of it. There's also problems with ETH once again becoming inflationary. Jet, we've got on the slides here, two more slides. I've got an image of ultrasound.money, the ETH supply merge, which was now 2 years and 153 days. So 2.5 years ago. Of course, we covered that on this show, and I'm almost certain, without having checked the tapes, that our take was, well, they think that they've solved economics, celebrating how they were going to be deflationary and even more sound than BTC. Of course, that was completely fake. So after about a year and a bit of the supply declining, it has since started rising again. So since the merge, there is now 23,000 and 120, or it will be more. It's always ticking up. Extra ETH has been issued, and it's continuing to grow. So ETH is once again net inflationary. Once things have, calmed down, they aren't driving so much fee burning transaction revenue, and competitors are on their heels. So all of this has created even more chaos. We've talked about Justin Drake's Beam Chain plan, which everybody also kind of hated. Somebody launched a second foundation to compete with the ETH Foundation, and then seems to have kind of given up after about a week. They discovered maybe it wasn't quite as easy as they thought. And then Vitalik stirred the pot even more with a cheeky tweet saying, "Make communism great again," which has opened a whole pool of discussion about to what extent he was joking, and are we just a left-wing knockoff like the BTC guys have been saying forever. And finally, the ETH Foundation have decided that things are not turning out. They've got to do something. So they have started putting their own money into the DeFi protocols, which previously they didn't do. So it's almost like bailouts. They're starting to try and prop up the protocols to add some extra volume and liquidity there, and are even considering staking, which they did not do before, because if they are one of the stakers and there is an ETH split, like with the DAO, if they are staked, then they will have to make a call. So then their whole cope about being credibly neutral will be out the window, because they will have to pick a side, essentially. Or if they didn't, they would be wasting a huge, opportunity, essentially. So this is just from, again, I'm not super deep on ETH. You can go look into Bankless or whatever else, some of the links on these slides if you want to hear more about it. But this is the state of the ETH ecosystem, as far as I can tell from the outside. Things are not looking too rosy over there. What do you make of this, Emergent? I can see you smiling there. What do you think?
I want to add some gasoline to that fire. So coming at it from first principles, right? There's a reason that General Protocols, our whole team, didn't build on Ethereum, because if you were just going to come on the surface level and be like, hey, where should I build this idea I have for permissionless money, for a product that uses permissionless money? If you just look at the service, it's like, at the time that we started, right, in like 2018, 19, it was like obviously on Ethereum. This was even before like the really EVM generic thing took off so much. It was just blatantly obvious Ethereum, but we didn't. And that's because of first principles, where we said, for the things that we want to do, in our opinion, ETH cannot do it eventually, right? ETH will run into fundamental problems of just fundamental engineering and mathematics that it can't solve in a meaningful way. And that's why we didn't build on it. And we also think BCH has other better properties, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, we chose BCH. Vitalik is not dumb by any measure, right? Well, maybe by some social measures, I'm not sure, like nose picking, like, I don't know. But he's not dumb. He's a very, very smart person. And when he started ETH, I'm sure he had one mindset. But ETH grew so far beyond what it started at, right? And I think, just my first principles perspective, is that Vitalik does not believe in the long-term viability of ETH as money, as a huge, massively scaled thing. I don't think he believes in it because he can't believe in it on first principles. That's my opinion, right? And so if I think that way, I think he's checked out. And if you think from that perspective, if you look at it from that lens, it makes sense, because he's just like, The fuck do I do? I don't know. I'm just gonna do some shit, throw some memes out there. So I think Vitalik is checked out to some degree.
No, I don't. I got to push back in this. Again, we're doing a bit of Vitalik mind reading here on the BTH podcast,
for
but
sure,
I don't agree. I don't agree with that take. I think he has been less in the mix, basically, and it's a sign of stress in the ETH ecosystem that things aren't working, that they're like, shit, Vitalik, do something, like if things were going well, nobody would care what he was up to. But I think also he is, 30, he'd be 31 now, right? So he's there's been various rounds of him, like, getting girlfriends or doing whatever. Like, he's got other stuff to do with his life a little bit. So I think there's been a bit of him getting distracted with that. And there was also the fact, he's made $1 billion. So he had a couple of those, whatever it was called, the Zuva Zayla or Vuza Zayla or whatever, that alternative hippie 3-month like resort or whatever it was that they did, like where he spent a bunch of cash with his mates to, I don't know, whatever they did, dream about ETH or something. Like, of course, he's like, I've got to have some fun out of all this, just after a decade plus of running everything in the ETH ecosystem, command and control style. Of course, he wants to have a bit of a break, and he has been having a bit of a break, taking his foot off the pedal a little bit, completely understandable. But what do you know? Of course, if you're relying on, it's like the sports team, if you're relying on your star player and he checks out for a season or just, is only putting in half time, the impact on the whole team is gigantic if that's how you were getting the job done. So I agree with you that now he's like having to come back into the forefront, but I don't think it's because he thinks ETH can't work. I think he thinks ETH can work. I just think he's also like, I want to get a girlfriend and go on this hippie. Like, how many more years of fixing all this shit for you guys do I have to do? Fiendish, what's your take?
Well, I think it's really interesting here. So with Ethereum, just thinking about Ethereum's history and why it was created, and this, the whole smart contracts was going to be on Bitcoin, but Ethereum was made and with a very different, account-based setup rather than UTXO. And like, I looked into Ethereum as well as, its future, and it seemed fundamentally broken from what I understood from a scalable point of view. But what it's done now, I just think about, like, all of these problems are essentially a result of how it's tried to solve its scaling issues, which also is very applicable, I think, to BTC and why BCH took the right approach, because Ethereum pushed everything to layer 2s. And the things of a layer 2 is it's really just a separate chain. And it's, the idea of layer 2, it makes you think of like some sort of, it's a stack and you need that base layer for it to work. No, you don't. Yeah. You don't need that. And that's why, so layer 2, I don't think is the correct term. And I think it gives a false impression. And so those layer 2s will continue going on and Ethereum will die. And, in something like BTC, I see it's like the similar sort of flawed thought process. All the layers that stack up, it's got to be based on the layer 1. And it's, if you've got a flaw with the layer 1, then it doesn't matter how many layers you stack onto that. You've got a problem with that underlying layer. Which for me, when I see all this happening and Ethereum is in place too, which is where I'd say Bitcoin Cash should be today, but Ethereum is in place too, but it has all these problems. They're all very real. They're all, I would say, self-inflicted. And it's the same self-inflicted damage that BTC has done. But now we're seeing the ramifications of that. And I would say, does it have a future? I don't know how it will solve this. And the fact that it's sort of reliant on this centralized personality, one of the original creators of Ethereum, I think is a very dangerous situation to be in. And yeah, sound money, you can't have that sort of a setup and never be sound money. And is a great reminder of BCH. It's scrappier, it's decentralized, and that is a curse in one regards, and it's a great blessing on the other. Like, this is exactly why it is in the best position still today. And I really went through all the top 30 coins. Is by far in the best position to be sound money for the world. So it's interesting. I'm sort of sat eating the popcorn, laughing a little bit, watching this all happening.
Yes, we've got the Kappa's 83 in the chat says ETH is a juggernaut, full steam ahead, but people are just in a bad mood because of the price action. The account model makes it easier to manage and store various types of data in a single centrally tracked structure. This makes it easier to handle the state of smart contracts and data more efficiently, which is a key advantage for rollups, end quote. But that's actually that's the problem. That's not the answer. Yeah. That's where things are going wrong.
True, except for the efficiently part. Everything that was said there was true, except for the efficiently part. It's easier. Yes.
Until it's not. Yeah,
that's right. Well, that's where I think Vitalik as well. People have this idea, I would say, probably especially more in the ETH community. They think that Vitalik was like the next Satoshi, but he's a very smart guy, and like you said, he's an incredibly smart guy, and he's brought a lot of innovation and stuff like that. But in his version, his remix of Bitcoin, which is ETH, he introduced at least as many problems, if not more, than he solved. Because at the time, not only was the whole field of cryptocurrency completely new, but also he was 18, 19 years old and had no credible professional large-scale engineering. Like, obviously, he could still code and stuff, and he worked on stuff as a kid, but he hadn't been in the corporate world or anything. So it's completely unsurprising that that's exactly how it played out. And I wonder I think if you asked him today, would you change a lot of what you did? He would say yes, because he's constantly writing blog posts about, we need to fix this and we need to change that and this, that, or the other. We've discovered that it isn't working. But it's like I've said on the show before, it's basically just a Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. You fix your Band-Aid with another Band-Aid, that creates another problem. And it's just this endless series of, it just all comes back to the UTXO system. Monolithic. That's
one of my favorite quotes. One of my favorite quotes from Uname is they're doing their best to turn the account model into the UTXO model. So emulate the UTXO model using the account model.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look. For me, I would love to look peer past that curtain of big blocks happened within BTC, within Bitcoin very early on, and also the expansion of the VM was done. Like, would have Ethereum be created? Would it continue being created within Bitcoin?
No, not a chance. But we're going to see anyway, because if we're right, which I think we are, but if we are, and we can prove it out, and BCH, with the upgraded VM and the better scalability just comes to wreck ETH, that will be the proof in the pudding, right? But there's going to be no excuses if we do as well too, because it's you can even just draw a comparison and say ETH had at least a 3-year head start on BCH, arguably a 4-year head start from 2017 to 2014 or 2013, arguably. So they had a 4-year head start. They didn't have to get dumped on by 1 megabyte sellers at all, and they didn't have to flip the BTC branding, which is both a pro and a con, right? But they didn't have that problem. So if we can wreck them, I mean, the cope is going to be amazing. I cannot wait for my call-out thread of what's his name, David, on Bankless. That is going to be amazing. I've got all the arrogant screenshots I'm ever going to need for that thread. But anyway, we got a lot of work to do to get there. Okay, that's enough. That's enough about ETH. Let's have a quick look also at our cousins in BTC. Likewise, well, they also have a number go up problem, ironically, where the BCH and ETH communities are stressed about the ratio going down. The BTC community is also stressed about that, but their stress is we're not going up fast enough. A cycle over cycle, BTC fiat gains are decreasing. So it's kind of what's called Matryoshka doll of they are then comparing themselves to the USD. So that has started to bring about more stress in the community. The Taproot Wizards raised 30 million to bring OpCat to BTC. Congratulations to them. Well done. And this is an area that I think the BCH community needs to be smarter about, getting better at raising funding ourselves, because you can't just say, oh, well, look, these guys raised a bunch of cash and they're going to waste it, which they probably are. But, fair enough. They got it, so they can waste it if they want, joke's on us to not get our own funding. But in any case, that's not going to make things any easier, actually, because it means they basically have $30 million to try and fight the rest of their own ecosystem. They're not getting the money to build productive stuff so much as to argue with themselves. CTV advocates are still hoping to somehow wend their way through to an upgrade this year. The lack of demand on the base chain that we've talked about before has had Mr. Hodl, Bitcoin Mechanic, Luke Jr., Adam Back, etc., restarting calls to lower the block size to 300 kilobytes. And of course, there's still your classic ossifiers and hijackers sprinkled around in the mix, to the point that was even this guy John Denny had a good thread on Twitter saying there is a global conspiracy to kill the medium of exchange aspect of Bitcoin and to proliferate USD dominance via stablecoins, aka CBDCs, with better marketing. If we allow this to happen, it will blunt much of the revolutionary potential of Bitcoin, blah, 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 which is basically just, we told you so 10 years ago, but they have finally clued in because they're not getting enough number go up and they're having so much chaos internally that people are really starting to wonder, what are we actually doing here? So any thoughts on this, Fiendish?
I can imagine they read hijacking Bitcoin from Roger Ver and Steve Patterson and be like, what? They knew about this, really? I think it's crazy, it's as if this is something that's new. But yeah, it's really, there's a lot to pick through there. So just taking the 300 KB limit. So anyone that's listening to this, if anyone that's proposing to further limit Bitcoin, what I would say is like the chain is obviously, it's got a long-term issue. With means of exchange, it's already over, I'd say. But, the sooner that this project comes to a crunching halt, the better it is for actual real P2P cash. So whenever you see anyone recommending this 300 KP limit, say yes.
Jump in, yes.
Just put both thumbs up and go, what a great idea. I wish I thought of that for a second because it's just crazy. But and the fact that they've raised 30 million, the Taproot Wizards, this is a shocking number. I'd love to know the details of that. Who's funding that? Is it in Bitcoin or is it in fiat? Is it like paid in shares of something? Because that's an incredible amount of money. And I agree with you, Jeremy. The BCH should be thinking a lot more with the entrepreneurial cap. How do we get that sort of cash injection into the ecosystem? Because I can only imagine what that money could do if it was allocated and focused in the right areas of the business. But yeah, you can see here that there's real concerns in the Bitcoin camp. The price is still incredibly high, so it's still very close to the all-time high. Okay, what is it, 10,000 off now, but still it's over $90,000, and the block size is the block usage is going down, the transactions are going down, the mempool is clearing, and all of a sudden. Yeah, there's no competition.
Lightning Network works again.
Yeah, Lightning Network works again. It's only 30% of the transactions, whatever, fail, but that's pretty good actually.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
It's crazy, and it is. And that's somewhere I have to admit. Sometimes I look at it, and I laugh. Sometimes I feel very like it's just wicked watching it. It's like how is this still going? But sometimes it is frustrating because it's how can anyone still think there is a future of this as separating money from the state and all of that, because there are there's clearly some good people out there. Raiden is one. I've enjoyed your talk, John Riordan, for those said the name right.
Yeah.
And there's some good people that still see this and they believe in the original Bitcoin mission, and they're just there's just fires everywhere. The building's collapsing in on them. They're like, but I can save it alone. No, I don't think so. I would say that ship sailed actually, but hey, there you go. So yeah, it's fun. It's kind of fun seeing this. It's kind of disappointing, but I still think for me, it really does show, and you can see it, the change in narratives. The Bitcoin Cash people were they were just ahead of it. I think they didn't move quick enough, but they were ahead of the game. So they really saw what was coming and what's happening, and everything that was predicted, everything that seems obvious in hindsight is happening. and everyone's seeing this now. Even the biggest BTCers, they're seeing this. And I think there's a lot of cope in that as to how they're going to solve this. So I wish the Taproot wizards all the luck in the world. I hope that Eric Wall comes to BLISS. I hope that he gets more in touch with the BCH community as he attempts this. I'm sure he'll fail with getting Opcat certainly in the state that he'd like to get it in, but there's plenty of room in BCH for him to keep on building what he wants to be building.
Yeah, who doesn't waste his whole 30 mil first? Yeah, okay. And Emergent, what's your take here?
I have two main points to say. One of them is just for fun, and the other one is very serious. The first one is that, the 300 kilobyte blocks where you see ideas in BTC that are obviously bad ideas. I don't support those. And the reason is it's way more fun to go to the ideas that are good ideas, where it's like, yes, that would actually help you, and stand there with a BCH sign and be like, this is what you should do. And they're like, oh, fuck. The BCHers are already there and they're supporting it. Yeah.
I've got that
and
thread.
to stand there and be like,
It's so good.
buddy.
It's like 5 or 6 posts long now of like quoting them, like, we want whatever. And then it's like, yep, tick, we've got that one. We've got this, we've got that. And it's like 5 or 6 different people. It's just getting longer over time. It's so good.
This is just another tack towards that end of like, let the zombie die, which is, one way is to support bad ideas. The other way is to make the good ideas toxic by weaponizing the black sheep nature of BCH, right? But that's the fun one. The serious one is that leads into, whenever I'm doing that, I'm also acutely aware that the people that I'm talking with, and not to insult them, but I really think this, but Reardon and CTV and Moonsettle and those guys are not operators in any way in the BTC decision-making process, right? They don't understand it. And they're just like the rabble making noise and stuff going on. And so any arguing with them or convincing them or whatever, in the end, has no effect. It's just, for me, it's kind of entertainment, because the people that are making decisions are not them. It's, BlackRock, Sailor, Adam Back to some degree, the core developers and so forth. There's a small group of people, and none of them are a part of it, right? Yes. And so the important thing is, the deadly serious thing is to watch them, because I don't know what their game is. I don't pay that much attention to BTC, but whatever their game is going to affect us also. The real game that's going on in BTC. And the real game so far is marketing. It's the marketing coin. It's the coin that number goes up, right? As you guys said before. That's been the game so far. That doesn't mean that's going to continue to be the game. And I don't know what game they're playing with it, right? Because it's USDT is also involved, one of the players. I don't know what the game is now, but whatever it is going to affect us. And as fun as like all the trolling and stuff is, like, I really don't think that has any actual impact on what happens in BTC. And I don't know what is coming. So
well, it doesn't have a direct impact. I think it does a little bit, in the sense that by all this, we change the public sentiment. Of course, it's not getting at the heart of the issue, granted, but it is still worthwhile doing, to a certain extent. Yeah. Fiendish.
I think it's not actually going to impact BTC, but I'd love to attract intelligent, hardworking people and so forth. Yeah, sure.
You raise a really good point there, though, and there's something that I hadn't actually really considered properly recently, at least, is the fact that, so I'm convinced the numbers go up thing, it can't go on forever. There's a certain point where the amount that's needed is just so high. It's like any Ponzi scheme. There's a point where it collapses, but they're not going to let it collapse and then all of a sudden BCH just jumps in and solves everything. So I think it's a really, I don't really know what the answer to that is, but it's definitely like so there is something else that's coming for sure. It isn't just going to be the NGU attack. And what that'll be, and it's a reminder for me. So I really think that the larger voices in the community, it's always important, no matter what you're promoting, whatever that to remind of, like, what's the underlying cause or the reason behind Bitcoin Cash, and what's the important properties. For example, that it's permissionless, that it's decentralized, that it's money, because it seems so obvious to everyone in the community today, but I guess it was obvious to everyone in Bitcoin in 2012 too, right?
It was.
And when
It
all of a sudden
absolutely
people
was.
start coming in, the entrepreneurs coming in, I think it's really good. Like that's the drum that should never be, that we should never stop beating, not for a second, because it will come. And if we drop that for a year or two, and all of a sudden, like, hang on a minute, how are we here now? No, guys, permission, this is important. And then there'll be such a critical mass that, already thinking something different, that particular vector, we should never underestimate how they will try and come for it again. So.
And when you're playing different games, it also means you don't necessarily gain by dunking on anybody. Dunk on BTC, the marketing number go up chain, dunk on ETH for the world computer or what it used to be. You don't maybe really even gain anything from that, right? Because you're playing different games. So you just got to make sure to win the game that we're playing. And that does have connections to those, but it is fundamentally a different game.
Well, that's why I said earlier, I don't want this show to be us, shit talking all these other coins when, it's like you got to keep your own house in order first, right? Yeah. And so that's why we did all that. But at the same time, they say, a smart man learns from his mistakes and a wise man learns from others' mistakes, right? So I think there's also still some value to us keeping an eye on what's going on in these other communities. And also just because the community then, if the BCH community is sort of at least vaguely up with what's the latest going on in these things, when there is other discussion like at crypto meetups and stuff, like you're still intelligently, part of what's going on if you have half an eye on it. But yeah, of course, first and foremost, we just win by delivering ourselves, right? Improving our own situation until it becomes undeniable. And that's the ultimate, proof is in the pudding, right? Okay, so we've
I just wanted to add one more thing. Like the one of the really entertaining parts for me, this is not super valuable, but is watching when it's like Eric Wall versus some other dude and they're arguing. And like Eric Wall is wrong about half of the points that he says. Like he's right about one thing, but he's wrong about half the things that he says. And then the other guy is like right about this little thing, but he's also wrong about half the thing. It's just like this mix of just, oh my God, it's a circus. Like these guys fighting with each other and none of it makes any sense and they're all wrong. It's just
that's why the alignment. That's why the alignment matters so much.
Yeah,
that's why the chip process is so critical. And also, it all comes back to, and I think it's funny to see them endlessly going in circles about the block size war. Like they talk about it much more than we do. You can go on BTC Twitter any day and listen to I was there during the block size war. Listen to me, 2024 class of whoever, like about the good old days of it's like that was 7 or 8 years ago. And that was where I finally got through to Mechanic as well, is I wrote up that big post where I reviewed all of his stuff. I did it, and this is a lesson of proof of work. This is not a thing that I just pulled out of nowhere. I've been commenting on his YouTube channel for years at this point, at least 2-3 years on some of his videos. I've watched them in detail. I've provided feedback. He's replied once or twice a little bit, but he hasn't. I poked him on Twitter. We called him out in the hoax video, which I don't think he watched because I was actually quite complimentary of him. And then finally I got him with this. He did this 1 hour about Roger Ver, and I pointed out all these points that he was wrong, also acknowledged points where he was right to be, balanced and fair. And then I said at the end, like, I'm happy to discuss any of this, but please don't say something that I didn't say. Don't argue with someone that isn't me, your imaginary enemy or whatever. And what did he do? He wrote back and he said, yeah, those are some good points, but big blocks can't just infinitely scale. That's stupid. So none of this is relevant. And I said, I didn't even say that. I didn't say that. I specifically said, don't argue with something I didn't say. And he did anyway. And then when I wrote that back, like, I feel like fine. And then he said, well, fair enough. Actually, you have some semi-reasonable points. So that's just an instance of how you can break down this cognitive dissonance that people will have where they're fighting. They're not arguing with you. They're arguing with their projected version of the evil person that I want to be able to
caricature of BCH or whatever.
Exactly. And that's often years out of date. It's with some gigamegs. It's with someone that wasn't you making some argument in a different time at a different point that had nothing to do with what you're saying or what anybody is saying now. And so to get them up to that point, that's how you have to do it. You have to show so much sincerity that you're willing to engage fairly with them and then deal with their points very fairly one by one. And then when they say, well, what about this? Then you say, I didn't say that. Who are you talking to? And that's when you can get the light to go on at least a little bit. Like, yeah, wait, maybe I'm not, this is 2025. I always say that a lot too. It's 2024, it's 2025. Just bring that to their attention. The split was 8 years ago. Paul Stortz, exactly the same thing. He was now complaining it's BCH's fault. It's the big blockers' fault for leaving me with the crazies in BTC. Like the ultimate level of just.
I love that post. I really thought I liked it. I liked it because when he started, hang on a minute, what are you writing there? This is proper Stockholm syndrome. But I like what you say there, Jeremy, and this is something that I think is so critical for any BCHs that are listening. Your point there, arguing or not arguing, but discussing, talking in good faith. This is such a critical aspect. And this is something where I think Callisti is really a great role model for this. He does this. I've seen him heard him in many discussions where he's really, he's been throwing some quite bullshit stuff, but he's remained very level-headed, very calm, and countered the arguments. And I think this is great. And I think that BCH has moved, overall a lot in this direction. I still see it sometimes with some members of the community. They really lash out when someone says something like that. And then they feel this need to be right. Relax. Argue in good faith. And if you assume in many cases the other side isn't arguing in good faith and actually you don't care, you can ignore those people. That's okay. Just move on with your life.
Well, the way I think about it, and I hope this can help people as well too. It would be funny if this gets clipped and they, replay this. It's like talking to children. Okay, so the way it is if you're a parent, or if you're not a parent, you've been, you've seen someone in this situation, right, where the parent is like, you're tired or you're hungry and you're upset and angry, so we need to, go home and stop having fun at the beach or like whatever, right? And the kid is really mad and is screaming all these things. If the adult starts screaming back, nothing is going to get resolved. But the adult knows that they are right. And they also know that the kid doesn't know that the adult is right, and they can't really understand that. So when there's all this angry, whatever, if you're the adult in that situation, you're just perfectly calm, right? So that's why if they start coming up with this, Bcash or some arguments that you didn't know or price charts or something like that, if you literally just let it go by, okay, all right, all you need to translate in your mind is you're angry. And then you just write back as though you're talking to a child that's angry, which is where you just tell them, you're angry, now what? Are you, how much more screaming do you want to do?
Yeah, and they'll remember that. They'll remember how you made them feel. So in the end, hang on, I was really venting and this person stayed calm, they stayed neutral and argued with facts. And they'll remember that feeling. Yes. They won't remember necessarily the facts, but the feeling like they were in control and I wasn't. Yes. Exactly. And this is what can really shift the cognitive dissonance, is that feeling of like, oh, okay, I'm the one that's something. Emotional.
I must be missing something.
And then they're much more likely to then actually start doing some of their own research. And that's when you got them. So I really like this approach. I think that's a valuable lesson that everyone in BCH could take. Definitely those that are on Twitter or, interacting with BTCers socially. So it's good.
Yes. And it also works in person. That's the advanced level. Practice it up on Twitter. You can pull it off in person, but you really got to be on point with it there, because obviously if you're making them mad in person, you are actually at risk of like a physical confrontation in some cases. But it can work. So don't firstly hit the gym and then secondly, make sure you've put in your reps online before you try this in person. But it is absolutely hilarious to also do it in person. Okay. BLISS 2025. We're just going to quickly touch on that. Let's skip the other news. That's boring. We don't have time for that. BLISS is coming up, so this is our regular shill of it. Go and grab your Velma on TapSwap.cash. You can come and meet these two amazing gentlemen live in person. They've got, their builders tickets all ready to go. Fiendish, you'll be speaking, I believe, and Emergent, I think you're not listed as speaking, but we might get you on one of the panels. I do really want to run back the closing panel that we did last year. So we'll see if maybe we can make that happen. But I don't know if you want to give any quick thoughts on BLISS before we just roll into our last segment here.
Yeah, man. I was actually I was like, nah, I don't have a particular reason to go to Europe, and I'm not really. And then just the more I see like who's going and the stuff that people are talking about, I'm like, I want to go. So I just changed. I flipped. I was like, I'm going. Yeah.
You're gonna.
Yeah,
you're
no,
gonna
man, it's
miss
gonna
out
be
if you're
great.
not there. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So I flipped.
Come along. There you go. Okay. All right. Message to the community. You both know how it operates. Emergent, you're first up. What does the BCH community need to hear?
Execute. Take an idea that you think is going to win that, somebody else hasn't done the same thing yet, or they have, and you got to do it better, and take something that you want to do. If you can't do it all yourself, find somebody to work with you and try to make some money making products, services. Just make it happen, and you got to execute. You can't stop on the first step. Yeah, just execute.
Yeah,
take your idea and take it all the way.
Take feedback from reality. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Take feedback from reality. Just like you were saying
sure.
before, with the protocol upgrades, like don't assume that's another case of just imagining obstacles that aren't there, right? Like you only know when you start pushing. When you start walking in a direction, you'll quickly realize that some of the walls you expected just aren't even there. And some
they
of the
don't
ones
exist
that you
yet.
didn't expect are there. And then you run into them, and then you have to figure out a way around. Okay, good thoughts. Fiendish, message to the community.
Yeah, the message to the community with all the crazy shit that's going on in the world today, for me, there's nothing more important than separating money from the state. And we put a new low on the ratio. I went through again, had a bit of a sanity check, going through all of the coins that are in the top sort of 30. Bitcoin Cash is by far in the best position to take on this mission. So stay in there and keep on helping this amazing technology reach the masses. I agree with John, execute. It's the 80-20 rule. 20% is the strategy, 80% is execution. Get out of Telegram. Stop having ideas. There's loads of them. Shoot on one of them. Pick your best idea or someone else's idea. Quit whinging, quit discussing it, go and do it, and we'll have success. And the last point, if you haven't already got your ticket, get your BLISS ticket. Come and join these awesome people. So, we've got Jeremy there, there's Emergent there, I'm there, and basically every builder pretty much that was there last year, plus also some more. So come and meet the people that are building tomorrow's future. Buy that ticket today. Get that airplane ticket booked up and join us in Ljubljana.
Yeah, somebody commented a little while ago saying about, did Peter Risen start Nexa? Like, why did he just go off on that? Why doesn't he just help BCH win? And he is going to be speaking at BLISS, and so we're all going to get a chance to meet him, and you could buy a ticket. Come along and ask him yourself, what's the deal? What's going on? Like, what are we wasting time with his Nexa nonsense rather than just making it happen on BCH? It's very understandable that at the time, for whatever reason, they felt like they needed to do things in their own way, but BCH has improved a lot, and I'm sure he is going to be feeling that on the ground at BLISS for sure. So that's the exact way to get people back in the game, basically. And then, of course, Snowflake to Avalanche, right? You get a couple of people switching back, and before you know it, everyone else is thinking, wait a second, this has got some serious leg. We're really starting this, maybe we're just sort of on the precipice of that. I feel like Ryan X Charles has been crushing it recently. Shout out to him. After coming on the show, he was floating some more ideas on Twitter. What about this? What about this? Different ideas. Peter Risen, few more. I feel like we got a winning combo assembled. All right. Our Fund Me. Quick shout outs to Majamali Marcelo, Founding Father, Molecular, The Show We Love, Erdogan Talk, Economics Writer, Milton Friedman, at Cash Stems, Keep Calm and Bitcoin Cash, and Emergent Reasons. Please experiment with new ways to get you, Callisti and Fiendish, in front of some serious media spotlights on that, actually. Yeah, it would be good, but it's just, we're just so strapped for time and attention. That's kind of cuts to what I was saying before. I think that the best we can do is just keep doing good work in the ecosystem, and we'll know it's really crushing it when people start coming to us. That's which we've started to see maybe with that, whatever her name was, Tatiana, whoever, who wanted to do a debate and then fell through. Might follow up with her what happened about that. But Anyway.
By the way, Milton
we're
Friedman
starting to get
is sponsoring the BCH podcast. That's amazing. Back from the dead, there's some money.
Let's go.
I think Adam Back was also a supporter at some
Adam
point,
Back
right?
is in. Peter McCormack.
I think that was real. I did some chain analysis. I'm pretty sure that was.
he would be a pump.fun believer, that's for sure. There's no doubt about that. All right. Our supporters.
Pump.fun Luke token on Pump.
Yes. Our donators, thank you very much. Really appreciate our patrons, Ricky and HP, and our sponsors, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com. So thank you for watching the show. The start guide, FAQs, and links are at bitcoincashpodcast.com. If you're new, you can listen to episode 85 and try Selene Wallet at selene.cash. Final shout outs. Emergent, you're first.
Just shout out to everybody who's trying, who's making effort and pushing ahead and trying to make things happen. I really appreciate everybody, and there's so many out there. I'm looking forward to everybody's success.
Fiendish.
Big shout out to every single one of you people at Bcashes that stays positive and keeps on building, keeps on making this ecosystem better. Big shout out to you.
Jet.
A dumb shout out. John Mess made this sweater, super comfy sweater. I'm a big fan.
All right, nice. So, and my shout out goes to the two of you because, like I said at the start, it really is the case that having Fiendish and Friends, having GP Spaces, I listen to that, at the end of the day sometimes when I'm kind of winding down, getting ready for bed, and it's a good kind of, time that I can just be relaxing, and then that's all then swirling around in my head when I'm asleep, and the next day suddenly I'm having all these fresh ideas, right? And it just takes so much pressure off my shoulders. I feel like having so much regular content, and also Paul as well. I got to give it. He's been crushing it with the YouTube videos. He's been in the Philippines recently. He's been doing great work. Definitely go check out his channel. He'll be at BLISS too. I'm 99% sure. So yeah, just the other content guys.
Paul has been amazing. A big shout out to Paul. I really love that. He's our toned down, PG, family friendly Sonny in Europe. Because he's actually going out. He's making videos, of showing Bitcoin Cash usage, and really nice. Really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping they'll run some more of those. They did that meetup and got Thierry Bourdet in there, and that was apparently kicking off. They had 50 or 60 people at that. So before we know it, there might be a whole new hub, that sort of Netherlands/Belgium region for some reason. Yet again, who knows how these things work? Seems to be a bit of a BCH hub. So we'll keep an eye on that. But come to BLISS and meet him too. He's a great guy. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Until next time.
Take care. Bye.